And thank you for joining us tonight at the DGC Art Direction Masterclass. My name is Marian Wehak, and I'm a production designer based in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm also the DGC National Art Department rep. I'm happy to share that the DGC All Art series has just celebrated its second anniversary, and our first event was the Circular Design Build webinar, which was held on August 14th in 2021. Which you can still access on the DGC YouTube channel, along with other previous All Art events and many other really engaging DGC masterclasses. So we'll post the link to the DGC YouTube in the chat, and I encourage you to check it out. It's a great channel. The DGC All Art series has proven very popular to attendees from across Canada, the US, and as far as India and New Zealand, with the primary intent being to create a forum that can be collectively enjoyed and valued as a way to share, learn, and amplify the work we do in the art department. And it's with great pleasure that I welcome so many of you today from hopefully across the geographical divide. I don't know where the registration is from tonight, but typically that's been the case. This masterclass event responds to the terrific attendance we've enjoyed at all of our art events. But it also is specifically responding to the many requests we had for a masterclass focused on art direction. Today's panel is composed of one art director from each of the 5 DGC districts, who collectively represent a wide array of both production and life experience, with the event being moderated by production designer Isabelle Guay. We'll begin our art direction masterclass in just a few minutes, but first, a few things worth mentioning. To allow the hour-long conversation to flow with ease, we'll reserve the Q&A for the end, for the last 20 minutes or so. Yet as questions or comments come to your mind, feel free to put them into the Q&A. And towards that, we'll reserve at least 20 minutes at the end to deal with all the questions. And in the meantime, in the chat, we'd love to hear where you're zooming in from. So feel free to put that in there, and also to make comments amongst yourselves. This event's being recorded, and the recording will be posted on that DGC YouTube channel I mentioned. And our tech guru, Julian Lung, who's in the back room with us here, will post a link to the channel in the chat for those of you who are interested. And I hope there's lots of you that are. It's a really good channel. Finally, please join me in honoring this request and acknowledgement. Wherever you are in Canada or elsewhere in the world, please take a moment to honor our Indigenous people's long history of welcoming many nations to their beautiful territories. I'm grateful for all that we have here in Canada and Ontario and Toronto, and I am committed to upholding and uplifting the voices and values of our host nations. We also acknowledge those who came here forcibly, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Therefore, we honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. Now, I'm pleased to introduce you to tonight's moderator, Montreal-based production designer Isabelle Guay, who will introduce our panelists. But right now, I'm delighted to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Isabelle. Isabelle Gay's fine arts background and her baccalaureate in architecture from the University of Montreal has inspired her creativity and empowered her with construction and engineering skills to execute the design visions in all of her subsequent film work, a career in which she has worked with many of the most innovative and acclaimed filmmakers in the business. Some of Isabelle's recent production design projects include creating the 17th century world of bark skins for National Geographic Fox 21 television, the visual drama of the 1960s Cold War tensions in Pawn Sacrifice, and the misanthropic comedy Santa 2. All of these projects speak to the scope of Isabelle's unique creativity across all genres, including fantasy, period, horror, contemporary, and action dramas. Isabelle has been a DGC member since 1994, and prior to becoming a production designer, she garnered an impressive body of work as a supervising art director on some of the industry's most riveting films, including Alejandro Inarritu's multi-award-winning The Revenant, Denis Villeneuve's Oscar-nominated Arrival, Midway, directed by Roland Emmerich, The Celebrated Mother, directed by Darren Aronofsky, Steven Spielberg's The Terminal, and George Clooney's directorial debut, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. She also has an extensive experience working with several Oscar-winning production designers, including Jim Bissell, Janine Opalwall, and Nigel Phelps. In addition to her film work, Isabelle has a passion for travel and photography and scuba diving in the tropical and Arctic climes. She is fluent in French, English, and Spanish, and is currently also the DGC Quebec Art Department rep. Bonjour, Isabelle, And I'm heading behind the curtain now, and I'll let you take it away to this fantastic masterclass in art direction.
Thank you, Marianne. This is just so great. Welcome, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. I just want to welcome you today to the masterclass on which we'll talk about the art direction position in the industry. As Marianne mentioned, we'll reserve a time period at the end for questions and open discussions. So please try to remember until the end. Art directors are crucial and essential on any size of projects, from a small commercials to a big budget features. So it's a position that's a little different from countries to countries, and even through Canada, we can notice some little variations in the workload, to try to paint a portrait of the art direction's day at work. We are happy to have with us today, 5 art directors. I don't know where you're from in the world. So today, we're happy to have 5 art directors from across Canada to exchange on this fantastic job, which requires both sides of our brain to be working at all times simultaneously. So please welcome Nathan Blakey from Alberta. Hi guys, I don't see you on the screen. Hi Nathan from Alberta. Barbara Agbaje from Ontario, Félix Larivière from Quebec, Ewen Dickson from the Maritimes, and Maggie Keiley from Newfoundland, Labrador. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, Isabelle.
Hey.
Wonderful. Nice to see you all. And this is so great to have you all tonight. Thank you for joining us and be so, give us all your time and effort and explain what our job is and what you like about it, where we're going with it, what can people be accomplishing with this fabulous art direction position we have. So I'd like to begin by, asking all of you guys to present yourself and talk about your path and how did you become an art director. I think it's it's a good way to start, just because it's also different from people to people and how do we get there and how did we become. So maybe you can start by West Coast to East Coast. I think that then it starts with Nathan, right?
Yep.
If I'm not so weird of my geography in Canada.
Hi guys, I'm Nathan Blakey. I work primarily in Calgary. I've spent 12 years in the film business, 3 years as an art director. I've worked in construction, set deck, greens, special effects before I worked in the art department, which was a very valuable experience for me. I actually started an engineering degree and dropped out halfway through, and I came back to film, and I'm very glad I did so. So yeah, that's kind of my intro.
Barbara?
Hi, my name is Barbara Agbaje. I mostly work in Ontario. How I got here in terms of art directing was pretty much I graduated from university under architectural science. And I worked in the industry for 5 years, loved it, realized that I wanted to change my career though, from architecture to something different. I decided to join the DGC in 2011. Been working in it for 12 years, give or take. And I started from a trainee position to a second to first assistant, doing mostly set designing. And now I'm here doing art directing, and I've been doing it for about 3 years. Love it, very hard, but I still love doing it. I'm happy that my background is architecture because it really helped me figure out how everything works together in terms of our industry.
It's probably part of one of your, your day-to-day job to look at.
Oh, for sure.
Set design and drawings and everything that gets to do with the construction side of it, right?
To be honest, like having architecture or interior design or whatnot, it doesn't matter. Having that foundation really helped me in terms of becoming an art director. So I know there's a lot of other people who have different experiences, but this was just one of mine. yeah.
And do you look, I'm sorry, Nathan, I'll go back to you because we jumped like very quickly from you to Barbara, but this part of your work is to overlook, the set design drawings?
Yes. So having that background, usually what I like to do all the time is look at people's drawings before it gets to construction. I want to familiarize myself with their drawings. I want to be able to understand their the sets, because basically it's coming from production designer. My job is to facilitate, to make sure that the production designer gets what she or he wants, but it needs to be within context of drawing.
To be surprised about it, right?
Yeah, you do not want.
That's not really what I was expecting. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barbara. Félix, next from Quebec.
Hello, everyone. My name is Félix Larivière. I'm based in Montreal. I've mainly worked in Montreal, but I've also had the opportunity to work abroad outside the country. I come from a construction family. My dad was a log home a log home builder and designer. So I was raised in that, a good part of my family was in construction as well. So I was really raised, looking at drawings, making drawings with my dad, construction drawings, and also being on construction sites, which, I always felt good on construction sites up to today. So I think that added up a lot to me becoming an art director. So I studied theater stage design, and I finished in 1998. And because I had also family and relatives in the movie business, I'd seen a lot of sets then already and stuff. And I kind of studied theater a little bit because of that industry, not quite knowing what I wanted to do, but I had the opportunity to have summer jobs and be a trainee on sets and things in the art department already. So when I got out of my studies, I had little bases and I really wanted to design sets. So I was for like 2 years, I was a swing gang, really, how we used to call it, a set decorator, technician. So moving stuff around and dressing sets and everything, a lot of physical work. And after like 2 years, the art director I was working a lot with, I said, if there is a next project that involves, set design, that'd be awesome. Like I've done a lot of this, and I'd like to move on to. So I had the opportunity to work, on the next job, which was Pluto Nash, a big feature film that was done then.
Yes.
Construction. And so that was my first set design job, and right away I finished this, and I was lucky enough to get on the next job, which was the score with Marlon Brando, De Niro, and Edward Norton. It was like another sort of big production. So I was very excited by all of it, and I realized, as I was sitting there, that I had good background in construction, good background in theater, but I was really lacking the architecture side of things, of detailing things. And it was a big catch up for me, a big learning curve to be sitting at a table and having sets to deliver without, it was a lot of catching up, and the construction people would call me in the shop and show me, like, that's a window. It's made like this, and that. Like, you're drawing no sense.
Cross section of a window, Félix.
Back to your table. But it was very good. So I did a lot of set design for just about 10 years. I liked it lots. And I was a very involved person. It's hard for me to sit at the desk all day. So I would, follow up on my drawings and go into the shop in the mill and meet the people. And after a while, it became sort of, natural that I would become an assistant art director, because I was mostly in the mill and on stages. So, some clever art director used that with me. And I did, I worked a lot on a lot of majors in Montreal, and I became an art director. I did a TV series by myself, was not as a supervising, but as the key of the department. And that sort of got me going. And I had the opportunity to work abroad in that same position. And I became a supervising in Montreal, and I had some, my second job actually took me outside of Montreal to Italy as a supervising. And that's what I've been doing for like just about 10 years now.
I was going to ask how long you've been doing this, Félix, because I remember we worked together in 2001, 2001. And as a set designer, but it's been a long time ago. My God, it goes so quick.
It goes so quick, but yes, I started in 97, in the summer of 97, somewhere like that, in movies.
Great. Thank you, Felix. And then we'll get
Right.
back, we'll talk more about it later. And it's great to hear that, all the paths of where people are coming and, that you had the family and the construction, and then some others are like from architecture directly. And Ewen, talk about you a little bit and tell us where you're from and what you've been through and how did you get there?
A very background coming out of high school, and started off by actually doing a phys ed degree. Realized that wasn't where I wanted to go, and then bounced around doing everything from being a pewter smith to working in the theater in New Brunswick. Moved to Halifax, got trying to do a degree in architecture, ended by doing a degree in environmental planning, bachelor design. And after a few years, the company was bought out, whatever, and I was looking for work. I heard about this project going on, a film project, and I had some carpentry skills. Next thing I knew, I was in the film industry doing carpentry work. Did that for
Okay,
many
so you
years.
were in the carpentry before.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you were carpenters, and then at the same time that you did the architecture degree.
No. I after doing the planning degree,
Planning degree.
it was some work dried up, and I was looking for other work.
Okay,
And
sorry.
this opportunity came along. Boris Claiborne was a film. And I thought this was brilliant, good money, exciting, until the next year was a little quieter, about 2 weeks work. But anyway, I ended by doing quite a bit in construction, and eventually got the opportunity from a producer I was working with, who asked me if I'd like to be in the art department and do some drawings for their project. And just went from there, went for many years doing mostly set design, drafting. And again, an opportunity came forward to ask to be an art director. And I still do occasionally jump back and do set design. Occasionally I've done production design, but mostly doing art direction at present. And I think the biggest joy, why we love what we do, is that it's never the same, from project to project, from children's to sci-fi to horror to period piece. So it's that's what drives us.
It is so true. Like what we're doing is and this is also my my joy of what what I do every day, that our job changes, and then we go from a futuristic to a period movie to something that's more contemporary. And there's tons of research that we do also, and we'll talk about it later. But there's tons of research that we need to do to accomplish our job every day on the working day, and it's amazing. It's a fantastic job. Thank you, and thank you for sharing where you come from. And Maggie, Keiley, thank you for joining us, Maggie. I knew that you were on a tech scout today, and you just barely made it. Like
barely haven't had supper, but I'll be eating a little bit on the side. So, yeah,
thank you.
Survey. Tech survey. That's something that's art directory. I started in graphic design and in advertising. Actually, I had nothing to do with film at all, really. And I was a studio manager and a production manager in advertising, and was invited by a local producer to come over and help him out on a project. And I did. And then I didn't work in film again for a long time after that. But then I was invited to come back as a art department coordinator, because as a studio manager and production manager in an advertising agency is very close to a coordinator in a anyway. So that was about, I'm going to say 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And I've worked my way up to, art department coordinator and second and first, and just recently have become an art director. I've only done 3 or 4 different series, and they're all TV. Usually with just one production designer and 1 or 2 art directors and a small core crew, 3 or 4 carpenters, a couple of painters. So small series.
So you come from a coordinator side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Which get you lots of
I
lots of
like it. I like it because it
funny
shows
stuff.
people that you can come from different, part of this world of the industry. So some people we have, and then we'll talk about it, but people are thinking the path is the path, right?
No.
To get to art direction. And you just are saying toot, toot, putting
Yeah.
us on the spin that it could be different.
Well, I know that graphic design doesn't tend to go into coordinating, and then coordinating doesn't tend to go back into art direction usually, but it certainly does happen, and I know that.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know graphic designers that have been graphic designers and are production designers.
Yep.
Wonderful person.
There's only 3 art directors, DGC art directors in Newfoundland, and one is one of the other ones from a graphics background as well, and one of the other person is from set decorating. So everybody came.
So 3 art directors in your province, right? In Newfoundland.
Yep.
And I forgot to mention how many U&D. Can you just tell us a little more about the Maritimes and how many art directors there is there?
Just put 3 or 4 art directors, which sort of ties in with how many projects we do per year. Occasionally, there on some larger projects, you might have someone parachuted in from Ontario. Depends on the size and scope of the job.
Okay, so people from Ontario would just fly over and take.
Occasionally, most of the time, we handle it here.
Yeah, happens in Newfoundland as well, Ontario
as well.
Well, especially if it's a co-production with Ontario, or if it's a co-production with Quebec, we'll often have a Quebecois art director or production designer come in as well. So yeah, it's happened in both ways. It's
nice to see how we can, communicate from province to province. It's been, people always think that it's easier for IA to travel from one province to the other, but this is something that art directors do, and I'd like people to know that we are traveling, and there's there is job for us across the board, and our next discussions, I think it'd be nice to see a little bit of we'll talk about the job description, but what do we actually do as art directors, and if we can describe what's the very beginning when a show starts of what's the job, from the time you start reading a script to how do we get to have a team together and everything is happening. And then we can get back to what are the differences between the provinces, I think. So as the job description of an art director is a very difficult thing because we do so many things, but I'm sure that we have a lot to talk about there, and the difference of from, okay, you read a script, where does it start? Anyone want to jump in first? I'm not going to go west to West Canada this time, so whoever wants to jump in, please feel free.
I wonder if
Félix.
we make the distinction here, perhaps the difference between an art director and a supervising art director, because I think that.
Wait, yeah, sure, absolutely. I think that you're right, Nathan. That there's a difference between supervising art director and art director. Regarding the size of the project, they'd be art directors if it's there's a production designer and there's an art director, and if the show goes bigger and grow bigger, like a bigger production, then we need to add more art directors. And then at the moment that you start adding more 1 and 2 and 3 art directors because of the scope of the project, then you need to put someone at the position of a supervising art director. I think that Félix comes from that world where we have bigger shows showing up to Quebec, and then also Barbara in Toronto. You have your little hand up there, Barbara. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Go.
I just wanted to add, for Ontario right now, you can have large shows where you have multiple art directors with a supervising art director. The current show I'm on, it's the same thing. And you have other shows like smaller where you only have one. For the bigger ones, it depends on how that production wants to break up their art directors in terms of You can have your supervising art director that does most of the hiring, that deals with most of the budgets. And then the art directors underneath them are the ones that are split up into either groups of dealing with just locations or just dealing with builds, or you split them up a different way where one of them is just responsible for all the builds and one of them is responsible for graphics. It's really dependent on the production and how they want to organize their crew. And also supervising the art directors tend to be the ones that hire. So that's the only input that I have, but you know, depending on other people's locations, how they want to break it up, that tends to be in Ontario. Maybe Nathan, you have a different perspective.
No, I actually agree. It's pretty much the
It's
same.
funny, guys, you put the little hands up. You don't need to do that. You can just jump in. That's
Yeah, definitely pretty similar over here. Like larger productions, we're gonna have a supervising art director, multiple art directors, and then we'll split it up either by sets on a feature, for example, or maybe by episode on an episodic TV show.
Mhm.
But definitely more and more splitting up the work is super common.
I think it is like the supervising out there would be there, and then you let me know when you start describing your job, guys. But if you're supervising, you're in charge of you know, putting the budget together, and then you know, the breakdown, the script breakdown, budgeting, whatever the show is going to be, putting crew up your art department, and then decide of how many art directors you'll need, and put this art director in charge of, as you just described, Nathan. You're going to be in charge of that set, or this set, this set, this set. And if it's a series, we're just going to jump from one episode to the other to give a break of preparation and getting ready for the next, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe you can just jump in and just explain what your job is as the position you've been working lately on over the years. So Nathan.
Yeah, for sure. So I have to, I guess all of my experience so far as an art director, I've always worked under a supervising art director. So usually when I come in, the set list, the budgeting, the staffing, it's already been handled. So usually I'll get tasked with a particular set or multiple sets and manage those sort of based on my strengths and my abilities. I tend often to get locations for whatever reason. I don't know if that's just maybe based on my character. I tend to be pretty hands-on and I like talking to people and I like to communicate that way. So maybe I just draw the short straw every time. I don't know yet, but that's generally what. And usually for me, when I start, I'll want to know, I mean, really the most important things are, when does it shoot? How much time do we have? And sort of reverse engineer back from that to figure out, do we have enough time to do it? Do we have enough people to do it? What are the expectations? What are the finishes? Start to have conversations about what the final product is going to be and how we're going to get there. You know, sometimes you need to build in time for doing testing. If we have, you know, complicated sequences or complicated, textures or finishes, we have to test some of these things before we even start. So I'd say a lot of the job is, constantly checking in with people, having face-to-face discussions about how things are going, what are we making sure that we're working towards the same thing ultimately that the production designer wants. So like I would say 90% of it is communication.
Because also you're saying, Nathan, that you're doing a location for whichever reason you do a lot of locations, but that brings you up to have to be able to communicate with all the other departments of the needs of each event and every one of them, right? So
Exactly.
if you go to a location, there's going to be, the grips are going to come over, the electrics are going to need to rig their stuff up on the ceiling. There's like so many things that we'll need to take care of that it goes to you. They shouldn't normally go to you and try. You have to figure out when these people are coming in the schedule and what's going to be installed, how you're going to fix that, special effects at some point, and greens, and and
Exactly.
picture
You have
car
all
and
these-
all other departments, right?
all of these people are working in isolation, really, from one another in a lot of ways. So you sort of need to kind of mesh everybody together and make sure that you're headed down the right path, you're on time, and you're going to give the production what they expect and what they've been promised. So I would say that's kind of in a nutshell what the job is as an art director working under a supervising art director. That's a loose, brief explanation, I would say.
It's a good explanation. And I think that I believe that every one of us here tonight are doing the same jobs in a little tiny different way, but we do have responsibility once, you know, of you know, either that you don't need to be a supervising art director to have, you know, to take care of the special effects and the electrics and the grips and the greens and the picture car and, you know, so many other things. The difference may be at some point we'll talk about it, like, do you also overlook the drawings or the set design or the graphic designers part and the research? But we'll, you know, we'll talk about it more a little while. But Barbara, is it the same in your, you know, what as you work as an art director, right?
Yeah, so I tend to working under a supervising art director. I think in my first job, it was more or less overseeing 1 or 2 studio sets. And I've gone to deal with studio sets or location. It doesn't really matter. So I deal with more or less looking over drawings from set designers, making sure that the designer gets what they want. And I'm always making sure to facilitate what goes out into the public in terms of construction, scenic, material selection. So in terms of art working under a supervisor, I'm not there to hire people. I'm there to just facilitate the workers and making sure that everything gets done at a timely manner. And honestly, locations is probably harder in a nutshell, is because you're dealing with really unseen issues compared to on a studios, you can actually deal with all the issues, and it's also very close proximity to where the office is. So it's just like easier travel, where in Toronto right now, traffic is just horrible. So to get to certain locations, it's tricky. And you also have to put that in mind when you're going to location. Do you have enough time to go there and facilitate all the people that are there, and at the same time make it back for meetings or whatnot? So sometimes right now having Zoom is actually beneficial. Not doing it, you can't. Very hard to facilitate what's going on in the office when you're on scout or when you're on location.
That brings me to Maggie. Maggie, I know that you have this chart that you're, you know, we're trying to explain what our job is and what the day-to-day. So maybe you can start from there and, you know, what's the job when we start and how do we pick it and where do we have to take it?
Okay, I'll put up my chart in a minute, but I think the way I'm working on a TV show now, series Hudson and Rex, 1 hour police procedural. And we have 2 art directors, no supervising art director, but we swap blocks. We have a 2-episode block. Mm-hmm. So I'm in prep and the other art director right now is shooting. And then as soon as I can be on to all the tech surveys and he's on set. And then come Thursday, I'm shooting and he goes back into prep. And I read his scripts, or, you know, the scripts from his block, not his scripts. God love me, he's talented. But, so I read the scripts from both blocks, but unless, and it has happened, like, you know, COVID and different things where he stepped in and helped me out, or vice versa. But basically, it's hands off, and we sit next to each other, and I'm like, when can I have my carpenters? When can I have the paint? Can I start graphics? And I'm
because you share the same paint and graphics, right?
So you share all the crews, and we're always really respectful, or we really try to be about, like, you know, obviously what's filming comes first, but he's very good at keeping me up to date and saying, okay, I think I can free up the carpenters by tomorrow or Tuesday, and then And then so then I know that I'm going to have time to put the carpenters into a build that I'd have. But it's not only construction. If, like, for example, if we're doing a build and it's on locations, I might have to deal with, like, do we need security there? And then you have to call locations or security to make sure that we can have things locked up. You have to think about if you're going to need a 6-day because sets has to get in, but construction might have to get in, but there's nowhere to put paint. So maybe they paint on the weekend, So you're always, it's like a great big puzzle. And Julia, now I'd love to show my tornado.
Maggie, when you do that, I think there should be, is there a coordinator or art department coordinator helping you in putting this together? I'm talking about security and scheduling and
no, I mean, we mostly do it our own selves, and we're not putting together security. We just phone and say, listen, this build is going to be starting 2 days early. We're going to need security there for the next couple of nights.
So the art director would be talking directly to security needs and locations, and you don't go through the coordinator to do that.
No, I mean,
Okay.
I mean, the construction coordinator, they'll phone me and say, we might need it, or we'll work together on that. And, but yeah, usually I'll phone. This really small, but what this is all the red blocks are when we're shooting, and all the stuff right over on the left-hand side, Julian, if you could see it, is everything from drafting, construction, sets, and it's just completely scheduled. There's, when people can get in, when things have to be done, so that we can make our shoot dates. So even though the, drafting might say, oh, we're not shooting that till, the 15th of the month, I might need to have it on the 1st of the month so that everything can flow. And I guess everybody understands that. You just have to schedule it. And it can be all kinds of strange things, like we have studios and locations, and maybe we can't access locations, or maybe they're shooting in studio on one stage and we can't work when they're shooting. So you take all that into account, you make your big giant schedule and hope for the best, and then budget.
It'd be nice that you can zoom in a little bit, Maggie, because it's hard, for us to see what,
zoom all the way in.
Let's go that you go for one set. There's this one set called Atrium or whichever you want to pick. And
zoom right in there in the middle, and I'll yeah, there we go. So you can see,
explain that you have lines for graphic works, and then drafting works, the carpenters, the painters, the sets, which you can explain with it.
You'll see on the third one down, which is that was a woods, a safe house we built in the woods. So we actually built a little safe house. It was lovely, and the drafting was done. But you'll notice I have a 6-day with a question mark, because we didn't really have. It was a big build, and we needed to get in and out. And I think after that, you'll see on the 11th of November says security required, and it wasn't required before because what we were leaving wasn't as precious. It was fine, we didn't need security. But when we were finishing the house, we had to talk to security, make sure that they're in there. You'll see, so this drafting, then paint has their time, sets has their time. Trying to see if there's anything
if you move to the right,
and then
the red is the red zone.
The red is when we're shooting, and then there's wrap, of course, which we have to include, even though we don't want to give up our crews for wrap. We have to. We're always like, please stay and build, but no, they have to go wrap. And so trying to schedule all that, and then scheduling it within a budget. So that's the other thing, because I'd love to have 30 carpenters build stuff and have it all on time, but a lot of times we have to balance whether it's going to be a 6-day or overtime versus extra people, and what all the implications are of that. Locations cost money by day. If we can get in 3 days earlier, that's great. I might have enough crew, but maybe it costs too much, and maybe I need to bring in more carpenters and do it in 2 days. So you're always trying to balance, and it is a big puzzle. And that's what I think of art directing mostly, after you do your breakdown and schedule. And you work really closely with second ADs too, because they're the ones who tell us when we're shooting where, and we're like, don't put that there, that's too soon, I can't turn that set over in that amount of time and stuff.
That's another great section of what we're doing in our job, is like to organize the schedule. And I think that there's so many people don't know that art directors have to work the schedule and trying to be ready. And can you swing this set before this one? And I need to redress this, you know, that studio for another one. So we work very tightly with the 80s department, you know, in my mind, and try to figure the best schedule to accommodate the best production schedule, right?
And with
Anybody
that,
there? I'm sorry, I think I had a little break in the video there, but I'm sure every art directors in on, you know, on this panel at the moment, and you guys outside, I've seen some kind of that chart that she calls it a tornado. I call it the tableau, and there's other names that we can put for it, but
Master plan.
Yeah, it's a
master
Gantt chart.
plan.
and
Basically-
this, I don't know if Julian wants to zoom out. If you zoom out, Julian, this is actually just one episode, which is for us 14 days. And we're doing, there's one block, sorry. So it's 2 episodes, but we do, you know, 8 or 10 blocks a year, so a season. So, you know, you do that, that's 2 weeks, and then you turn around and do it again for another 2 weeks. And then, so every 2 weeks you're switching back and forth. And so it's a bit of work, and it's hard to keep it all in your head. And you're going sometimes balls get dropped, and you try not to drop too many or make it up in the end. And, you know, work really hard to make sure all your notes are good, that you don't show up at a set missing, you know, a key piece that you need, or.
So a good part of your workload is to communicate with the grips, construction, electrics, and you probably had this to your schedule when they're coming in, when they rig, when they do, you know, the wrap. And when you say wrap, the electrics have to wrap, the rigging have to wrap, and then construction have to wait that the lamps are out before they wrap their, you know, demolish the set, right?
Yeah. Although our yeah, we're not as it's not as big as that. You know, our sets are more in and out in a day. So usually construction shows up, and I mean, the electrics and grips show up at the beginning and wrap at the end of the day, and then sets comes in and takes away. But that's just the nature of working on a series, as opposed to a big film with big builds. We have a lot of little builds instead of.
I think that the main thing which is so similar is that this chart, you know, the more vertical you see the red is the more danger zone, because, you know, when we have in a big show, the red slope is a little bit slow, and if you have the red that's very vertical, that means that you have so many sets in so little time, so that's going to be a crazy schedule. I think everybody can understand that this is you know, one of our great schedule charts,
Yeah,
that everyone uses in the art direction business.
Go on that schedule too, and that format, you know, you can add so much ins and outs of the stages, the set design, everyone, when the, you know, special effects is working, it becomes a very, you know, important piece, to me at least.
I think, I think we can take it away now, Julian, just so we can see people talking, but there's so much information that we can add to that spreadsheets. Exactly like Félix was saying, is that we can add the grips, the electric if we're working on stage, grips, electrics, graphics, set design process of drawings, you know, doing the drawings first and then construction, and then we can add the plaster people if you want, and then the greens and the paint, and every department could be represented in that chart, which is the master chart that the producer likes to have in his office and just print it on a plotter and all the colors and say, hey, it looks great. Yeah, right.
You guys have a plan. Good job.
They often
Exactly.
think it's crazy.
Yeah,
I
no. You know, I remember we've been printing those. Like, I want one of these in my office. It's yeah, it's not just a poster.
I really wanted to say really quick, I find with doing those charts that are helpful is usually once you look at your one-liner from the 80s, then you have a date when your set is going to be shot. And then you go to your locations and you figure out your ins and outs.
Yep.
And you'll talk to locations or construction and rest of the other departments to find out, especially set that, how much time is necessary for them to do all their work. And then that will figure out, that's how you kind of figure out how much time is required for them to come in, do their work, and get out so that they can do the shot. So that's pretty much if somebody's trying to understand that schedule, that's pretty much how it works from the beginning.
Yeah,
Someone asked.
It gets crazy. It gets crazy when you have all those colors on the same day, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, this is the paint, this is the construction, this is greens, this is set deck dressing, and it's on the same vertical. Not so good.
You know that's a bad plan already.
Someone was
Because visually
asking what program that's in, and it is just in Excel. And you know, it's just once
Yep.
once I set it up the first time, I like setting up stuff one time and then just running it. It's the same way I do my budgets. I have like the cost of a flat, the cost of a ceiling per square foot or whatever, and then I just like, how many square feet do I have for, how many flats do I have, how many square feet ceiling do I have, how many, and it just all falls in, and then I have a good idea of my budget. And it's all just broad strokes. Like, you know, obviously I could go up and you know, over and under, but I have a really solid idea, and it's just repetitive because Excel's really great for just repetitive stuff like that. So.
I think the other good point to make too is when you do see in a Gantt that everything's stacked up like that, and you have your one line, and some of those sets are complicated, you have to go talk to the ADs and just say, look, to deliver this set to the level of expectation, we're going to have to move it, or we need to rejig it somehow. So it's very visually telling how screwed or not screwed you are in particular cases, I think.
To me,
No,
I
absolutely.
need
I
to work
was
with
like I
this.
was saying, if it's so vertical, at some point
Yeah.
it just overlaps so many that you say, I cannot just, you know, it's not going to be possible, guys. Give us a little bit of a break there, and go elsewhere and come back, right?
It also seems like a very successful tool when you're communicating with production on why these things aren't possible. As you have, when you explain it, it's very easy to understand. You can show them, look, all these other sets are fine, but this one's, like you say, stacked up, right? So I think it's a good tool to show not just art people, but other people on the production.
Absolutely. And then sometimes you don't even have the answers for some sets. It's not just a question of it's in the schedule, but you know, you're still waiting for answers for the director, the DP, or you know, scene is not final. We need to rewrite a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So sometimes you don't have all the information to start designing the proper set for the scene, and you want to push it a little bit further down, you know, further down the schedule.
I've also
So
seen
great tool.
one last thing on the Gantt. I've also seen it used by supervising art directors at the very beginning, even for staffing the art department, where, you know, you kind of know how many weeks it'll take to design a set for the level of complexity, you know, and when you start to see that stacked up, you might have to add set designers, you might have to add graphic designers. So it can be even a good tool to use, I think, in the beginning to negotiate staffing.
The team.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely. Because you know, when you start putting the calls together and see when they got to be delivered, and like 6 weeks of drawings or 4 weeks of drawings, 8 weeks of construction, and this is where it adds up. And then you have all those yellows stacking up, and you say, 6 guys are not going to be enough. I'll need more set designers to be able to draw this, so it's ready for construction at that time. It's a very good tool. It's a very, very good tool. From the small projects, Maggie, that you're doing, it's a series, it's going fast, and then and to a bigger, you know, $23 million art department budget that I done, same tool will just sometimes more details, but you can line up.
And that proves to be a good structure. I've always said, you know, if you can work on a structure that can be expanded, you know, from the smallest project to any project, then that means your structure is good. That document, like I started my own, like all of us, I guess I started my own document, my own schedule. I have a cost report, budgeting document that I built myself, you know, but as I expanded to bigger jobs or bigger projects, I would find little things. I'm like, oh, this is not allowed in this document to do this, but the structure increases. And then I feel like this document, when it's well done, like any document or any structure, can be expanded to any size of projects, and your system then just stays the same. You're just adding people, but then your managing becomes, you know, that much more efficient because you have a tool that works the same all the time.
Can flux. And so everybody agrees that this is a document that every art director has been seeing and worked on and built, and it's one of our base of work, of everyday work, is scheduling. So I know we're we were going to say what's our job description, but I think that the scheduling of a project, of a construction, paint, and putting everybody out there, making sure we're ready in time, how many people. So this is that tool is part of our work and is a good tool for our job description. Anything, Félix, you want to add to? We're talking about job description of an art director, so it's really more. It's really there's way more to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, in the general, and I think this tool is a good example of that. But I find, besides what you do, really as a position, especially as a key of department, whether you're called a supervising art director or an art director, but when you're at a key position, I feel as an art director that you're really there to deliver the vision of someone else. You're there to deliver the production designer's vision, but also that includes the director's vision, that includes the production's context. So I try to put myself there as a person that is there. I blend into the project, and I try to be a solid person that people will refer to. So, I'm here to find the path. I will give you a path to get to where you want it to be. You have ideas, so I'll find the creative solutions and the technical solutions to give you your sets, to give you your projects, to give you your project and the money you have and how much you want to spend on it. And I feel very honestly that this is one of the best tools for it, is because you're taking information from everywhere. You're taking information from production. That's how much time you have. That's how many sets you have in the script. That's how much the designer wants to build. And that one, graphic things gives you all that information. And then exactly, this is kind of the code to me. This is kind of the code to the path. Like, if we follow that, I made a plan and it kind of makes sense. And then I think it's easy to explain. It's easy to know how much people you need. It's easy to go to production and say what you need to say. This is too much. This is not enough, whatever. Too much doesn't exist much, but
too many sets,
too much money.
But yeah, you can look at it and just say that, like, we're going to have to combine some sets because there's just, like, we have a limited studio space. So we, if, as I said, we have a studio A and studio B, and there's probably 3 or 4 sets, a couple of swing sets and 3 or 4 like standing sets. And if we can't be in one building because they're shooting, then we can't. It's like, you're gonna have to take this scene, we're gonna put it in location, or we're gonna have to combine it in something else, because we just can't build there in the time that we have. And that certainly happens.
So I mean,
I think that one of the things that when we start, and you may tell me otherwise, is like, you read the script, you do a set list, right? And everybody knows, like, where are we going to be shooting on this show? How many sets? And then you look at how many days of shooting, and this goes like sometimes, like, okay, there's so many per day. It's gonna go well, or it's gonna go like very tight. And then from there, you're gonna decide if it's a set on location or if it's a set on stage. Are we building that set, and do we need to build that part? And if it's gonna be a bathroom or a shower scene. So this is part of the job of an art director, right? Just at the very beginning with the production designer, just to sit down and go through the script and decide put the set list, and then decide where it's going, set, location, set on stage. And then the next step, guys, you tell me, but it would be like stage requirement from there.
I think once you have all your information, you'll make a plan. You will see how much people you need. You will turn in, the budget process, especially on, on bigger project. I mean, pretty much on all projects, but the, budgeting process takes a while. But meanwhile, you start, once you have kind of breakdowns, you've talked with the production designer, also you've seen the concept images, if there are already. Sometimes on shows, on bigger shows, the production designer will have drawn for a bit and have lots of concepts to show you. So it gives you, and then obviously you'll go into, approvals and crewing up, getting all the, the people you think you need to start with, and then exactly attributing the sets to each stages, seeing what's the stages requirement, how much time you need there, how long you need those stages for, how many times you're going to revamp it if you need to.
Yeah, that's part of it, the very beginning, right? How do we
Yeah.
And I know we're talking about bigger shows maybe, because in the series, maybe, I'm sure Maggie or Ewen, you're saying there's less built and more locations, but it's the same issue, right? Yeah, you see, no more, still built. So we're stuck with the stage space and requirement, and how much time does it take to build this and strike it and revamp it and rebuild it. And then I think that there's all of those. It's like a Rubik cubes. I see it like we have sets that needs to be on a platform, because there's windows and there's this action and that action, and that set doesn't need to be in, and we don't want to have it on a platform. So how do we revamp this one from this one? So there's all those criterias of each sets. Do we need the backdrop? Do we need do we need to be on a riser? We don't need to be on a riser. Do we need greens? No greens. What's the light? How can we switch over from one set to the other to be clever with the changeover, to be as easy as possible for the lights that are already on the stage ceiling, right? So we want to make it like this should be an exterior set. So all that is part of your work to put it together.
Yeah, and in that part, I think there's a lot of back and forth, between, that's going to be a location, we think this is a location, that's a build, and then there's the budgeting going on, and this is like, no, it's not going to be a location because of such and such. So now that needs to be a build, but we don't have,
stage space.
stage space, and production doesn't want to spend so much money. So how much of that do we really need? So there's a whole, and that usually takes a while, before everything settles, and or if it ever settles, depending who you're working with in terms of directors. But it's like, oh, that was VFX last week, but let's build it for next week. Yeah, but this is, I feel this is where you really establish your grounds, and that's a very important phase. Like, how do you begin and make sure you have all the resources announced to production and built up in your thing, in your system, in your budget, and all this. Because if you don't start that, if that period doesn't start really well, then you're going to suffer this.
No, you're right, because when we start from the very beginning, when we do our set list, there should be in there, we put like special effects. Is there rain? Is it night? Is it, are we going to break through this wall? Is it going to be a shootout? Or what's going to happen in that set? So when you start going to the set list, you put all those items per column, and I know how we all build this. So, and then it goes like, oh, now that we have all that, I don't think it's going to be a location anymore. I don't think we can do that on location, guys. So this needs to come on stage. And this is kind of how it starts, right? With a set list and requirements, a script, a set list, the requirements per set, and then you can move forward from there.
I also feel like as an art director, you have so many hats that you are filling in. And also it's almost like if you go to an amusement park and you see an information booth, then you get confused. And there's a person in that information booth that knows everything. So as an art director, it seems like you have to know everything. If you don't have the information, you're the go-to person that will get the information. Special effects will come to you for information, visual effects will come to you. It doesn't matter. Usually they always go to the art department to find answers, because they're either not talking to a certain department, but they always come to the art department because they know that our job is to facilitate, to find those answers for them, and also to give out documentations that give you the information that is required for them to do their job. So I just wanted to
Yeah, that's super.
No, absolutely right, Barbara. Yeah, they all get to the art directors finally and ask all the questions and say, hey, when? And sometimes we find out that we do a lot of homework for other departments, right?
Yeah.
When I first, because we're also very early in the process and everything, when I first read a script, and I think we had this discussion the other day, I think all of us kind of do that, but I'll break it down. The first version I read anyways, I'll break it down to all details. Like I'll do a little, scene description on my spreadsheet. Then I'll see there's that note for set dressing, that note for construction, that note for special effects, visual effects. And it becomes like crazy. It becomes too much and too detailed. And I know it is. And I know I'll never have time to update that document. But once I get in it, it's exactly as you're saying, Barbara, is like, I have all the information and I know it inside out. And when it starts changing, I might not adapt my own little document that I don't distribute and all this, but I know where I'm coming from. And when people will say, oh, isn't that a, you know, wasn't that a special effects? Like, no, that used to be in the old script, but then there was a conversation that became visual effects, and we don't need to worry about this for now. But you need to have the genesis of the project in your, inside you, I think, as an art director, because people will hit you from all sides, and your decision making will be much more educated as well from all that little knowledge, right?
But it also refers to the AD department at some point. I think that we're all very good at being the mom and dad of the whole gang and trying to get information for everyone and make sure that everyone knows every minute of every day what's happening. But there is other department that also have to do their own homework, and but we do have a lot of answers, and we have the drawings, and we'll have the whatever Dropbox or the server for everybody to look at the drawings and share the information. But I feel like, yeah, we are the hub, the first hub of information.
I also think the art directors are kind of like the last stop for like the weird stuff. So, if you're making, if in a film, there's a child getting a sandwich and, that stuff, nobody's going to ask the art director about it. But when somebody wants to know, for example, how I was going to tell you examples, but probably confidential. So I go back a few years ago, we had to figure out how much $10 million worth of cocaine was in 1978, and we had to figure out how big that would be. So we're trying to figure out how, and how would it be normally packaged and stuff. So those, like when you're doing stuff like that, so you're trying to figure out that kind of stuff, and there's nobody really that's going to figure that out. The art director is going to do it. They're going to get it approved with the directors and the production designers and stuff. But like, how much did cocaine cost in the 70s, and how big would it be, and how much, so those kind of things are I think really interesting, like, how a pipe bomb's going to look, or, whatever, those kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool. The research stuff for that.
So the research, so part of our job, research, and then, scheduling, hiring the right crew, making sure we're in time, budget, making sure we're in time. So does all of you do budget in the art department across, I'm asking because across Canada, is it all the same that you all art directors are doing budget? And is it just budget for the crew, or is it also budget for the construction and paint and plaster and all that?
Yeah, graphics, paint,
graphics.
Yeah, and
So Maggie, on your side, you're doing budget for every department.
Yeah, and I'm stressed about it because I have to do a big budget tomorrow. So after our tech survey, and I have all my notes about,
that's like
all in there. So what signage we're gonna need, or like today, I find out, okay, I'm gonna need to build this special piece of equipment for one of the departments, and like, okay, well, construction, and put that in. So I need, 2 carpenters for 2 days, and I need this much plywood and this much thing. So yeah, and then tomorrow I'm going to go in and put it in a great big spreadsheet and send it down, and hopefully it'll just, it'll be approved. But
so this is on your side, and then Barbara and Nathan, and I don't know, Ewen, we haven't talked about that, but I know Nathan and Barbara, you're not doing that part of construction budget. It would be the construction coordinator would do that. You would have to call him and say, hey, we need this and this and that, and he will put a budget together.
It depends on the show. From what I know, from the shows that I've been on, sometimes the art director will do a budget and have conversations with the construction coordinator, and then we will put the budget through to the PM, and sometimes it's the construction coordinator who will do it, and having conversations with the art director. We mostly just deal with scenic and construction, and we deal with the art department. Those are the budgets that go forward. When it comes to greens, special, that's their department. He actually
that's what, sorry, that's his
their department. That's their like special effects, visual effects. That's their department. Okay. We do not touch their budgets. Our budget is just the art department, construction, and scenic, pretty much, or any specialty that requires.
Yeah,
So
same
when
here.
you come back from a scout like Maggie did with all the notes, would
Yeah.
you give your notes to your construction coordinator about like, we need to build this and this and this and that, and he'll do that part? And then you'll do the rest of graphics or everything? Does he take care of that, or do you put the
No,
numbers? to
I'll
him?
meet him tomorrow and I'll say,
No,
okay.
you, Maggie. No, I'm sorry, Maggie. I know you.
Oh.
It's very clear. I was
Yeah.
just talking about
Oh, with Barbara.
Ontario, Barbara in Ontario. Yeah, it's to
For
see if it was
Ontario,
different.
what we do is we will go through it, like the art directors will go through it with their own budget, what they think the price is. Because they have gone, like construction always goes with us on these scouts. They have an idea of all the stuff that's gonna happen. And so, and then we have a conversation with them. They will put their budget and then we just pretty much have a conversation.
You compare.
Yeah, and then we'll just even it out, and then we will present that document to the PM, and then that's kind of how it works, depending on the show. Some shows it might just be purely construction coordinator on behalf of just construction and scenic, and then but the art department deals with graphics and it deals with the art department itself.
Got it.
Yeah.
And Nathan, on your side?
Yeah, pretty much
Similar?
same thing. If I'm working under a supervising art director and I go on a scout, and there are things related to my set or my episode, I'll definitely relay them back to the supervising art director if they're not on the scout. And we'll come up with a number together. But I think in a lot of ways, construction has the best information on how to budget certain things. And I think like here, typically the art department and construction will do the budgets together, but the construction people know the cost of materials and the cost of labor better than any art department person would, in my opinion. And then, so long as we can communicate what the expectation level is for a certain set to the construction coordinator, we can arrive at a pretty good number usually. But yeah, definitely depends whether you're working with a supervising or not. And it really just comes down to like communicating what you think you're going to need with those people, right?
Make sure as much information you can give them, and make sure like as much as we can give, then you can make sure that the numbers reflects the needs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Ewen, is it pretty much the same, or are you more like Maggie that you have to do everything and put your own numbers and make sure it all is going to go through and it's going to be wonderful?
Yeah, we rarely have the scope of project that involves supervising art directors. Actually, quite often the production manager almost takes on that role, in that very often we're told this is your budget for construction, paint, etc., graphics, and then within that we pick how many is going to be on your construction team. We'll need this many people on our art department team, but although they've worked a lot of that out ahead of time, we end up by massaging it, and then we go from there. And other times we'll talk again with construction coordinators for costs, because again, they do know better. But I rely a lot on trust within the construction. They know their personnel, how long it'll take to do a job. So giving them all the information as much as I can ahead of time, they can come back and sort of say, okay, this is going to conflict here. I'll need extra bodies for this job in order to deliver by this date. But we don't have that the same way, where we're going to give a dollar figure per set. And especially on a series, for example, you don't know what's coming up very often, except in the very broad strokes.
But at the end of the day, what I'm listening in here is that art directors are in charge of budget and putting the team together, from province to province. I know it's always a little bit different from countries to countries and through Canada, but we have the help of a construction coordinator, of course, like Nathan was saying, who can put, used to put the material and everything together, but it's going to always be a discussion between them and us, art directors, of like, am I in the ballpark? Is it going to work in the amount of days? Are we good with the amount of people? Can we make this happen? Or is it crazy to think that it's going to fit in? So it's the part of the art directors, as is in charge of that pretty much. I just, we're talking about
Montreal, and in Montreal, we don't as you know, Isabelle, we don't have that position doesn't quite exist, a coordinator. So we do have, we worked a lot. We evaluated from an old system, but we work with one main vendor that does all the main shows, and they're a family, they've done it forever, and but because they're a vendor, they're more like a construction supervisor, but we will make all the sort of estimating, budgeting, obviously sitting with them, discussing how much people and all this, they think they need, but we will put the final number on it and sort of don't have to share it with them. We'll say, we have so much money, you go on and I'll let you know when, but that involves the art director quite a bit, in making sure you're on the spot with your estimating and all this, and you end up being, the one responsible for it. On one end, it's a little tricky and it's a lot of work. On the other end, I feel like it allows for you to play a little bit and be more effective and controlling the budget and giving as much possible to the art side, making sure you have enough money to make things beautiful. How the production designer has been discussing about this set with you. So, the construction coordinator sometimes will go straight to, you said there was like, 8 by 12, and that was like 14 feet high. And when I do my budgeting, I'll leave a little more allowance. I know there's like some complex stuff coming. I know the discussion between the director and the production designer didn't go too well on that point. I'll leave a little money, we'll start, so I feel like this on that one end helps me because I'm controlling all of it. And I've learned that in Montreal, and we do that, we follow through with. And as I traveled and met sort of different systems, I felt it was still very helpful for me to do that anyways. However they thought, I would still do it.
Yes. Even if you don't need to do it there, you still know how to do it, right? And
I like to do it. It's the same thing as breaking down the script and things. I know where there should be money, and obviously, and very often when you travel, you'll have to turn in budget before you're even landed somewhere, or so you'll first pass will be on your own anyways. You'll educate and have more estimates come in, and local people help you in finding out about prices and stuff, and you'll have discussions. But the same way, you'll be, what, you say you could make it for 30 grand, but I don't believe you, I'll just keep 40 anyways, because I know, we're in a cheaper country, for example, but I know the quality that production will want and stuff. And so I feel this is a good part of the control. And that budgeting for me is the very important part to achieve the creative part. Like you have to be good and effective on how you do budgeting to make sure you can give everyone what they need, and that you have enough money and time to make things beautiful and everything, and that every creative aspect is respected as well, and that you're not saying, oh, we're just going to paint that flat because I never had money for that, but so it's a good.
No, we saw that in different provinces and countries that they say, okay, the budget was for that molding, and now you want to have that molding, and I don't have the money for that. It's like, I'm sorry, but this is, this was at the very beginning, and now I want to make sure I have that crown molding, and you cannot tell me I cannot have it, right? So it helps at some point to have a bit of a budgeting. Hey, listen, guys, I know there's a lot of budgeting in our world, but I also want to make sure we have a little bit of time to talk about our projects we liked and why and what they were, and also give a little bit of time, which is we have questions at the end for Q&A with people, and I'd like to, before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to make sure we have time from asking you what do you need to become an art director, what the skills, what are the requirements, what are the best path in your ways. So maybe quickly jump to what's your best and favorite projects, and show us and tell us about it just very quickly before we get to the next step.
I think I'll start. The first time I art directed was a CBC show called Caught, and the thing I loved the most about it was in prep. The show takes place in 1972 and then in 1978, and we had to make the two eras look different. So we did a lot of research, and everything from what, you know, appliances, the colors. It was so interesting to just in 5 years how much changed and how much research we had to do for color, for sets, for everything. And we had mood boards so that they were distinct eras, even though they were only 5 years apart. And the other part of that show was we built an entire boat set, and I didn't know anything about boats. I didn't know very much about the 70s, and I learned so much on that shoot, and I will always have a great memory of working that shoot. It was really fun.
I think one of our, you know, the love of my work is that we learn so much, and it changes all the time, and you go from a 1650 centuries or, you know, 16th centuries, and then you move into the future and you come back, and then it's a battleship, and then the next thing is is Robin Hood, and then the next. So it's always very different, and it makes us learn and research, and every time I read a new script, and it must be the same for you, it's like, oh, there's a new story, a new thing, and I should learn about Western now. I don't know nothing about Westerns except how to ride a horse. So Félix, what was your favorite projects and why?
So I worked on several beautiful projects. I find, I mean, my projects outside of the country, just because I was always a traveler, and when I had the opportunity to combine, you know, these sort of traveling and social skills and art director skills, that was always my best project. Our beloved production designer Paula Starberry brought me to Venezuela a while ago in 2012, and that opened a big world for me, and that was awesome. I've lately worked on Dune, and I did the sort of location on Dune too. So I was the not supervising because I was hired late. I was the senior art director, so I did Jordan and UAE, working with all these incredibly talented people, starting with Patrice Vermette and, you know, Denis Villeneuve that are from home. You know, this was a very special project, but there's maybe two projects I wanted to show you pictures of. One project I did in Rome in 2015. That was the remake of Ben-Hur. Maybe Julian, you can just scroll through those pictures. I'm not using too much time. The Ben-Hur ones. So I like this project lots because it was a project abroad. I had to adapt to a lot of new people and new systems. It was a very big challenge for me, in that, you know, it's kind of my second supervising art direction job. And also there's a lot of construction. The logistics of it was very, very wild. We were shooting out, you know, in different locations in the country, different builds, and a wide build like this one, the, you know, racing circus and all this. Huge challenges, beautiful constructions, and I've learned quite a bit there. So yeah, I mean, you're seeing pictures here of the circus. I don't know if we can scroll through the next ones.
So everything you built on that show, I'm just looking at the pictures, you know, just so for people to understand, you built to some level, and then the next level up was going to go visual effects, right?
So exactly, like if you want to stick on that picture, the circus was huge, humongous thing. We spent like $1 million just for the track itself, and probably $3 million for what was built. And there was no way we were going to do more than that on any kind of show anyways. But so what you see in here is like the Emperor's Box, where there's a lot of action and a lot of shots. This had to be built. On some other picture, you'll see the central spina is like the core of the thing. Everything was going to be shot against it, so we had to build it. And you see on this picture, there's one section of crowd of bleachers that was built that was going to be used for, you know, repetition, visual effects, repeating and building the full crowd. But we did build up, you know, to cover most of the angles on the race, some angles on the you know, public, and on the Emperor's Box and all this, and then the rest was all going to be visual effects, obviously. Yeah, we can just scroll through that. This is just like beautiful little pictures. There was one set that besides this very, very challenging and beautiful circus set, it was more standard construction. There was one set that we might see is the, okay, so this is the...
That's a full one.
Yeah, that was a full-on well, you know, the Ben-Hur's Palace. So this is just a section of it just to show you, but there's lots of shots, lots of rooms in it, beautiful finishes, all kinds of challenges for local sculptors and painters. On this show, everyone was, I'd brought a few set designers from Montreal because of the 3D aspects. That wasn't quite such a big thing in Rome and all this, but mainly everything was done locally with amazing talents.
So this is another one that we see that you have is it a printed drop at the background?
Yeah,
or is it,
so this set, we shot all the exteriors in Matera in the south of Rome, south of Italy. So what you see as the backdrop there was, we'd send people to take pictures, Roscoe people, I think, and they took pictures, 360s or good pictures of Matera, and then we printed it. They printed it and made a huge backdrop that was attached to this set. Yes.
So that's on stage. So this is also part of our, art direction work, is how to fit a set on the stage to make sure there's enough space for all those printed backdrops or green screen in the back, or whatever the background is going to be, right? So it could be, that's also part of the art directors to figure it out.
Absolutely. Julian, do you want to open a few pictures of the just the galley, if you have? So whoever's seen Ben-Hur knows there's a galley in there with all the slaves, and they get into a fight and they get rammed on one side, and the galley sinks, and they all are attached to it. So I just wanted to show a few pictures of that because this was probably my most involving art direction job ever. Like, this set was crazy complex, was on gimbal, was in the water, was at breakaway walls. We had, like, I can't remember exactly how many people, but like 60 people rowing. So there's like security issues. So I was really involved in how we made it, and all the walls would wild out, the camera would get in there, and blah blah blah. And then we built another half of it that we would suspend upside down for when it sinks. And we had a big pool built outside the stages, and we suspended that set in it with the guys and sinking it. So the whole logistic of this set was really beautiful to sort of think of. Here's an image of, just the section that we were taking care of, inside and outside, and the rest was always going to be visual effects. But what we were building was that part. So, and then, do I have another minute or?
You do have another minute.
Okay, so
we have like another 10 minutes, guys, to wrap up before we get to our Q&A. So I think we're good.
Okay, well, I'll do that fast. So another project that after Ben-Hur or on top of Ben-Hur, I was brought into 2 years ago into Transformers, Rise of the Beast, and I was sent, the production designer Sean Howard sort of met me and Michel Laliberté, and he was like, "Oh, you've traveled and you speak Spanish, and I see you've done shows outside." He said, "Michel has more experience here, and there's a lot of construction. Would you mind? Michel will do Montreal, and would you like to go to Peru and take care of Peru?" And I was like, it's a big challenge, but
Of course not.
Of course, I don't mind. I do have a family, but no, I was really happy to go there, and it ended up, just to speak as to our job is sometimes you're really onto stages, you're focused on construction, but also, going on location when the whole team is in Montreal, for example, on that show, and Sean was buried into designing robots and designing building sets. So what happened there is I was there for the first unit scout. We scouted the country. There was already some locations that we kind of knew what they were going to be. We were spread in 2 different cities, Cusco and in the mountains close to Machu Picchu, and then Tarapoto in the jungle. So we scouted all that with first unit, and then everyone left, and there was a lot of locations missing. And I will always remember Enrique, the DP, sort of tapping my shoulder and say, "Hey, we've not seen anything great so far, but make it great," mainly. And then leaving. So basically, I was there as an art director, but we did a lot of location research, and I was working very closely with Janice, the location person, we would just, you know, almost with a machete in our hands and find spots in the jungle and see that would work for what is needed. So it's sort of a combination of, you know, very helping with the production design in terms of just finding what it means, what it is and stuff, and sort of presenting it to the production designer and to the director and all this. And so basically we did all that prep. I, you know, worked with the local service company, Apu. That was a very good service company, but also didn't have experience on such big films. So, you know, we worked closely and sort of building a structure that was for the art department, but also as they were developing the production side. And, you know, they introduced me to people. I figured out how much we could do there, how much it was missing in terms of, you know, talents and things. And I brought in a bit of construction people, sculptors and painters from Montreal. And I did a match of, which I think was, I always was happy with that idea, but and I think I'll always repeat that, is I brought in an art director from, I had two sort of main locations. I brought in two art directors from Montreal that knew exactly how I work. They're people I trust, I work with, they know my work, we know each other's work. And they know also the standards of those productions. And I've matched them with a local art director that had the local experience, that knew how the people work there, where to find things, how it works, how much time it takes and all this. And I, you know, send them to both locations, and I would sort of go back and forth and making sure that things were advancing and everything. And I would, you know,
Yeah, because that's also a very interesting point of view, is that when you go abroad and you start working with other countries and the way that they put things together, the way that they're going to be building, the construction is built differently, the structure, they don't use the same material. It's going to be built out of steel instead of out of wood, and it's all very different. So you have to rely to the other art directors from the country when you're working over there and make sure that the communication works perfectly smooth between your schedule and their way of doing it and what you used to do.
No, 100%. And there's, you know, often things, especially in those countries. I mean, it was the same thing in UAE for different reasons, but sometimes you're like, oh, let's do it out of styrofoam. And they're like, styrofoam? That's like the most expensive. It's really hard to get here. Or I'm just coming up with anything, but, you know, so you need that.
No, absolutely.
And one thing is important also, because you are the person who's going to deliver everything. And when you land somewhere, is you go visit and make sure you like feel the place, like how is the construction. So I'd go visit, you know, I remember going in Venezuela and Caracas and visit the shop, the construction shop. And I was like, oh my God, I got to let production know that the shop is like 10 by 12. We're not going to build anything here. Like, let's think about it. So how do we do that? And on the absolute other side, I went to Peru, not expecting much. And then, you know, I was introduced to the Merida construction company, and I go there. They've built a museum. They're doing all the shows here and there. And they have a big shop. They actually have access to a lot of qualified people. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's think about it, because we can actually make quite a bit, and we can take quite a bit on our backs and say, you know, let's deliver this thing and make it beautiful.
I think most of the time when we travel across those countries, we find out that the craftsmanship is unbelievable, and we get very surprised by the finishes and you know, and what needs to be done. It's just to organize the scheduling and talk about material and structure that is different, if I may say, from our you know, own town or going from place to place. And you've been to Peru and other countries, and I was just to Vancouver, and Vancouver is really carving styrofoam like crazy. They're absolutely amazing about carving styrofoam, where in Montreal, not so much that, let's say. So we have to adapt our techniques to wherever we're going to be shooting and prepping a show.
Yeah, so there you have it. That was my two good experience outside the country, and two very good.
Thank you, Félix. Thank you. Nathan,
work.
you had a lot of things that you want to also share.
Oh, did I? Okay.
No, not today.
No, I definitely have things to share. Julian, can we put up? So I wanted to talk more about, you know, we talked a lot about the specifics. Well, I'll talk about this one first because it's related to sustainability, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay, because it was one of our points that we didn't get there. Is like, what's in our art director position? How can we help sustainability? So this is a great one.
Yeah, one of the things I did this year, which was new, it's the first time I've done this. So this is on set of a backlot of about 40 to 50 buildings. And you can see the name of the building there and the number that relates to the site plan. That's the tannery. And basically I have a QR code for each, I have a QR code for graphics, construction drawings, and I think there's that concepts or art director notes. And those take you to the Dropbox. So anyone can just go up there, scan it. There's a password, so it's all confidential.
So that you don't print everything like 60 times for everyone.
Yeah. And obviously we still end up printing lots of things, but this is super helpful. I've even used this myself sometimes when I'm, out there and I need to check something specific. I can just scan it in front of the building and I've got it right there.
That's very clever.
So
Definitely.
who's doing that for you, Nathan? Is this something that, I've never used, those codes before, so I think it's great. You show it today and I say, wow, because we used to print all the drawings and put it on the stage. And so how do you do that? Who's doing it?
Well, shout out to Daniel Nguyen. Actually, he's one of our assistant art directors. He set that all up. But I think basically you can just generate a QR code and have it linked to the Dropbox. It's just, you basically just take the link from the Dropbox and put it into a QR code generator.
You're getting a lot of love from the people who are listening. You're going to get some.
Yeah, I just see all the bravo.
That was very brilliant. Very brilliant.
Yeah.
I wish I thought of that myself. It's too bad.
This is something we need to put everyone, everyone listening and everyone is seeing it, and they all love it. So it's going to happen. That's great.
The other thing that we've done is we actually put up with some of our concepts. We'll go to the place where the concept image was taken from the point of view of the concept, and we'll put the stake right next to the concept. So you can see what you're looking at, but you can also see the concept. So you can show people, here's what we have now, but this is what we're trying to achieve. So that's been helpful. And, obviously super helpful when you have directors and DOPs walking around and they, might not have all that stuff. So that's on sustainability, but, we've talked a lot about, all the technical skills and stuff like that, but I wanted to talk about maybe some of the more almost philosophical things. This is my most beautiful document that I made in pages. And I think these are really helpful, to be an art director, some of the more nuanced things that are important. So I think really to make any good project, you need to have people you trust. And, that goes to developing relationships with your staff, but also developing relationships with your HODs. So at the beginning of a project, I usually like to, establish a pretty good rapport with these people. And, to establish a trusting relationship means that I can count on people to, do the things that they're going to say they're going to do. I think 90% of this job is communication. So I think it's really important to be, it might seem obvious to say, but I don't think it is all the time. Be super specific about what you're after. Be direct in all of it. I think this is kind of geared to someone that might be like an assistant art director that is wanting to start to take on more responsibility. Can we put that up again, if you don't mind? Adaptability, or let's go back to communication. I like to use image reference boards and stuff where I'm trying to communicate paint textures. So I'll have a picture that describes, I try to limit the amount of pictures that I use, but if I want to describe a paint texture to someone in the scenic department, I'll print it off and bring it to them and explain to them what we're after. And I think just having that image is hugely helpful and cuts down, lots of emails and lots of communication that you don't need. So that's a good tip. I think we've kind of talked about a lot of this, but adaptability, you need to be able to go in, Félix talked a lot about going into different countries and stuff like that. All the projects are going to be different. There's definitely underlying similarities, but, you need to go in there being open and flexible in your approach. Try new things, test new methods. But don't go into a project thinking that you got it all figured out. You're with new people all the time as well. So I think that adds a layer of complexity. I think the biggest thing that people in the office can do if they want to start art directing is like get out of the office and go out to the stages and go out to the shops and learn what how finishes are applied and learn what materials they're using and ask questions to the people that are doing that work. That's for me is super valuable to be able to keep up in conversation with people and answer questions. You need to know what you're talking about. And I think the only way you learn some of those more specific things, finishes especially, like you need to go and like figure them out with those people. It might seem funny to stay calm, but you'd be surprised how effective just being calm around the people that you're leading and how much, how smooth things will go if you're like that. Second last one is fast notes. So oftentimes you'll find yourself walking through sets with the production designer or someone else and taking notes quickly. And, I think we talked a lot about you're sometimes the point person that has all the information. And if you gather this information, it's really important that you communicate that quickly to all the other people. And like oftentimes, you might say, oh, I don't need to do that. And I think I've been burned so many times. If you wait to distribute those things, you'll regret it in the end. So I like to take fast notes as things come up, usually on pictures, and then I'll distribute them via email. I find it's still like the best method to all the heads of department. Learn to make decisions. Like, I think use this with your own discretion, but questions will come at you all the time. And if you don't develop sort of a threshold for which questions you can answer on your own and which questions you can answer or have the production designer answer, when you're working on a large production with a bunch of different sets, in a way, you're sort of the production designer's proxy. So get comfortable making certain decisions and know when you aren't comfortable answering a particular question, be the conduit to getting that answer quickly from the production designer. So yeah, that's sort of my nuance.
Something to that, Nathan?
Yeah.
No, because we talked about, we knew we had to talk about that. And one thing, just to add to one thing for me that I think an art director should learn to do a lot, and I'm working on this still a lot, is to have instinct, to follow your instinct, your guts. So when you're saying, learn to answer questions, it's also that it's sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know. I mean, if you don't have the information, you cannot make it up. But when I always found that when I let something happen that I knew shouldn't happen, or like you're like, oh, this is like not great, but well, we're fine, and you have the instinct to say something about it, or you have the instinct to make a decision, and then you don't quite make it because you're like, and then it bites you, and that's the worst thing, and that's the I think it's so trust your instinct and step in. I mean, make a decision. You have become an art director because you have all this experience. You don't just land there. No one does. Once you're there, you should learn to trust your instinct as much as you can, because the worst thing is to get bit by something you knew was wrong, or was the wrong decision, or someone was saying something and you should have made that decision right there and you just didn't do it. Not stepping up for yourself, and then you're in trouble with it. And I think it's also because you're an artist, you know it's the right proportion, it's the right thing.
But that's what it brings, like Félix, Nathan, that's what brings me to say that to be an art director, you have to have those both sides of your brain working at all time, at every minute. It's just, you have the artist part and you have the logic and the mathematic parts that makes need to fit on the schedule and the budget and all that. But you also have this other side of your brain that makes sure that the texture is right, that this is what the production designer wanted, this is how it should look great, this is what it should be. So all those two needs to be balanced out into a very, thin line of being good at it or less
It's
good
also
at it.
too, it's like it's left and right. And for me, I added, in my notes, it's left and right. It's also sort of forward and back. Is I find in our job a very specific thing is you have to be able to go zoom in into like one detail. That's very, like, most jobs are not like that. You're either like wide, macro managing or micro managing, but we have to go into the micro details and also like stay aware of the macro and the wide of it. And I think that's a very specific thing to art directors, and you have to be good at it and know, okay, I've done enough like micro, I've been, I've zoomed in enough on this detail, I have to let it go now and be back to like the wide scope of what's the department doing and what's the priorities and everything. But
I think it's a great example, what you just described, that the zoom in and out. I think that this is something we do every day, of like going into the detail of the drawings or the finishes or the texture, and then you have to pull back to say, there's 17 sets, so I need to make sure they're all ready, and all the drawings for each and every one of them is happening. So
and if you get cut in one or the other and you don't do the other side, then you're in trouble too. Like if you get cut in the micro, you're trying to do everything. Now all these other sets are not being built, and you're that one molding will be awesome, Isabelle, but
no, absolutely, I totally right. I mean, if people can be stuck in the, with that schedule, Maggie, that you call your tornado, and if you're on your screen and working the tornado or the Grand Tableau, whatever schedule, and stuck in there without being on the set or on the shop or looking at this or looking at that, you're going to be losing. You need to have both. You need to be
sort of
both.
Sorry, totally cut you off. You need to sort of like develop a filter too, to which things are important and which things are not important, and
sense of priorities. Yeah,
some of the ones, like, lots of people will ask you questions and ask for information, but some of them they just don't make the cut. They have to be ignored, and then some of the more important things need to be followed through. But worrying about something insignificant on a set is just a waste of time. Like, I think, like you guys said, don't get caught in the micro. Remember to zoom out.
It's almost like what you were saying, Nathan, time management skills. Very important for art directing, because your focus needs to be everywhere, but at the same time, don't want to lose the major aspect of what your job is or what needs to be done on set.
So listening to all of this, guys, what would be, if we were to talk to these people listening in and say, okay, I want to be an art director. So what would be the skills or the requirements? So what would be the best path, like a step-by-step to become an art director? What do you think?
To be honest, for me, what I found was, this is, for me speaking, is going from a trainee and going up helped me, because then I start understanding what every position does. Also working with multiple people, from motion graphics to graphic designers, and then working with construction outside of that art department. And just when you become an art director, you kind of have an understanding of everybody's position and what you can ask and what is needed and required from each person. So I found that it was very beneficial. Everybody has their own, but I found like going from the bottom to the top kind of thing works for me. But
certainly,
yeah.
Maggie? Oh, you're on mute, Maggie. Sorry.
I think you really just need to have a lot of different skills, and the path can be many different ways, but you have to, at least in my job, you have to be able to see the overall picture and the details. You have to be really good with money and numbers, and you really have to be good with scheduling and coordinating. And then you have to be able to talk, construction, graphic design, paint and finishes, even with set decorators. Like, you have to know a little bit about every department. I don't need to know how to, router a piece of something, but I need to know what I want and be able to communicate that to the construction people. So that's, I think, really where it comes from.
Nathan, Ewen, Félix?
How to start? I think, starting as a trainee is pretty important. I think that can vary a lot from production to production and province to province. But I think just being around that environment is a good start. And then I think you kind of have to decide, like, if you want to be more involved in graphics or if you want to be more involved with set design. I think those are the two sort of primary streams. I think if you want to be an art director, probably set design is the preferred approach, because I think what you're dealing with day to day is more construction paint than it is graphics. They spend the most money too. I think that matters a lot. So I would say, like, learn how to set design and understand the materials and the finishes and all, be able to speak the lingo. So yeah, I would say trainee, try to draw stuff. And yeah, second assistant art director or first assistant art director, and ask for what you want. Like, if you want to be an art director, say, I'd love to be an assistant art director. I'd love to take on this one set. Like, you kind of start, you have to be doing that job before people are going to let you be an art director.
Absolutely. And I think that when we put our team, and sorry, Félix, I'll get back to you, but when we put teams together, and then we've talked about earlier of dividing the sets with the art directors on the show, and I'm going to give him this, and I'm going to give, some people are coming from set designers and are great at drawing. Some people are not so great at drawings, but they do know the build, and they come from a construction side and textures and artists. So I think there's not like a one route, but you have to start at the bottom and have some skills, and then we can, as you said, tell me you want to be an art director, and I'll guide you to the right sets and the right, there's options on every show. There's options of, like, I need someone on stage being to work with grips, electrics, and very specifics, and I need someone, like Félix was saying, I'm out there on the field and I need to build this and in the rain, and with that I don't know, and it needs to look like this. So it's always different. I think that we can come from anywhere, but it needs to come, yes, from the bottom up. But you just have to mention it. And Félix, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
I agree with exactly what you're all saying. I feel like the fact of coming, and doing most of the jobs in the art department gives you an overview that cannot be paid for, that cannot be bought, that cannot, I mean, as you come in and want to be an art director, you'd be very happy to be given an art direction job on your first job, but you'll be way more happy if you've taken 10, 12 years to get there, when someone asks you something and you do have an answer, and when you come up with solutions that actually save the set because you actually know how the greens works, and you can actually make this tree like this because you can come up with that idea. Now everyone's like, oh, how did you, because you have background, you have depth in your work, and you're not just there sort of catching things before they fall and things. And I also, in sort of the path, I mean, it's weird. I don't know anyone that has studied art direction. I mean, people
there's no class.
There isn't, but sort of, I have before presented in my theater school a program, and I said, wouldn't you guys, but basically, I think, I mean, if there was an ideal school, just like for people to know what, to me, I've studied theater. I always felt like I lacked a lot of architecture, it took me years to like catch up with all that. But if there was an art direction school, I feel you'd want to blend the theater side of like stage design of, doing observation drawings, becoming an artist, as you would do in architecture as well. But, history, learn on literature, read scripts, design narrativity, which is very typical to theater maybe. And then if, you know, then you'd mix the architecture side with that in that same school would be awesome. Like a review of like, you know, architecture, aesthetic, uses of space, design of spaces. You know, in theater, I design a lot of spaces that are to be seen from outside. And then the first time I had to do a room, I was like, oh, wait, you know, it's weird. But it's all things you need to deal with. And, you know, in that same school, you could have a bit of managing, you know, budgeting. How do you break down, you know, budgets for art, you know, art department, crew management and hire. Like, I think we all kind of weirdly in this job, no one shows us that, you know, like it's like, you want to work with me and then you sort of build up your skills. But first, you know, the crew management, the, you know, human resources and all that is things that you kind of learn. But if you had a bit of a class, if you've had like a month of that, you know, way more than most of the people, you know. And even like, you know, I'd say even a bit of, you know, directing, you know, how like how do you shot list, break down a script, storyboards, just be familiar with all this. If there was a way to learn all that in school, then you'd come in the art department, start set design and be very solid. And when you have set design sort of in you, you have everything to be, you know, a great art director in construction and evolve from there is what I find. But, you know, sadly, that doesn't exist yet.
No, and then this is one thing I was going to say. We want to, you know, we'd like to put together an art director class and the DGC in Montreal, but it's so big and it's so vague and there's so many things that we just don't exactly know if it's going to happen and what it should exactly be. So our work is so, yeah, I know, but already it's so open that we need, you know, we'll work on that. It's coming. It's going to come, guys.
I think the short.
Nathan?
Yeah, you know, if people are watching and they're trying to figure out, yeah, well, how do I learn more about this stuff? Or I think finding a mentor, someone that is an established art director or is a supervising art director, ideally, find someone like that you can talk to, you can ask questions. Like, those are the people you learn from. Those are the people that have, you know, 30 years of experience. Those are the people you want to be. Obviously, it'd be awesome to have a class, but until we have a class, I think that's my advice to people is find someone that you really respect and jive with and ask them questions. And hopefully I think they're more than willing to pass it off to people.
Yeah, that's how we all at, you know, that's how we all at our times, you know, start from the bottom up and have leaders and mentors. And that's how I learned. That's how you did. Hopefully people can do that still. And it goes so quickly and fast these days that, you know, we were missing times, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's 8:24.
Yeah.
It
I'm
was
just coming
great.
because I know that
There's
Maggie
Marion coming in. She's going to bring us back to.
It's been fantastic, and again, it's obviously gone for 2 or 3 hours, I think, and everyone hasn't had a complete equal amount of screen time, so to speak. But Maggie has to leave. She's in Newfoundland, so they're an hour and a half ahead of us in Ontario here, and she has a tech survey or work tomorrow. So anyway, she has to leave in like 6 minutes. But I just wanted to jump in and just kind of acknowledge that, and thanks, Maggie. But also, we're going over, but hopefully everyone's okay with us having the panel go right till 8:30, and then we'll start the questions, because there's some really great questions and there's hardly any repeats, if any repeats. So I'd like to give a good half hour to the questions, and unfortunately Maggie won't be here to give them, but you've been really fantastic with your information so far. So I'm just going to shut up now so you can keep talking for 5 more minutes, and then I'll start reading the questions out. Okay.
I'm sorry, did I miss something? That you're going to shut up for 5 minutes?
I'm shutting up for 5 minutes. You have 5 more minutes, and then I'll start reading the questions.
Sorry. I think, is there anything that we missed, guys, that you want to just wrap this up? First, before we go to questions and answers, I just wanted to say a big thank you, because it takes a lot of let's go, we're going to do this. And I contacted you and say, can we, join and do this panel, which is a first. And I think it went great. And it's just so people can understand more about our work and what's our direction position actually doing, and how can we help people to come in and help them to understand the pros and cons and what's really important about our job. So thank you. I just want to thank you before we switch.
I just wanted
Okay,
to
Maggie.
say something. In Ontario, we do, I believe, have a course for art directing. But yet again, I think you have to contact DGC depending on your province to see if they do courses. And I took a course in art directing, but I found that exactly what Nathan said. If you find a mentor, I called up mine and I said, hey, I want to switch and try art directing, and they gave me my first job. And it was just because they knew me from a couple years back and they knew my story, and I just kept having conversations with them. And then it just became like, okay, I got my first job. And it's honestly learning on the job, especially if you have a really amazing mentor, and just being there and being present, understanding all the workloads and dealing with the multitude of people. Honestly, it's possible. Also, just if you're from Ontario, they do have a course in art. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and maybe just to sort of wrap this up, but as what do you need to be an art director besides all the skills that you will need? I think Nathan very nailed it in most of it. You need to be, adapt easily. You need a great leadership. You need to be a person who, puts people together and get the best out of everyone, on top of you, below you, all of that. And I like to see my job as a supervising art director as a resource person. Like, people will come to you, like the production designer, I need all this, I know, and the people under you, you need to. I like the approach of saying, especially when I've traveled, you need to establish a trust and things. And I like to take it, instead of I'll need this from you and that's how you're going to do it. I very often have said, we need that for the movie and you're the one who's going to do it. I'm going to help you succeed to that, because I cannot do it for you. You're the talent, but I know how to get there in terms of steps. And so I like to be that resource person that thinks outside the box, that have creative ideas, that keeps a team together, and so just sort of a moving forward person. I'm not fighting against production or producers. I'm giving them options. I'm letting them, as much as I can, know how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, and I'm coming up with ideas like, it's going to cost that much, but I can actually, if we were to, as a production, do it this way, I could do that. So I like to be a hub of like answers and just ideas. So to me, this is the main thing. The rest you kind of learn as you do it, but you have to put yourself in a great sort of position to make things happen in a beautiful way and give the movie what they need, right?
Yeah, you said that very, very beautifully. I appreciate that.
It's really great. I think that your little cheat sheet, Nathan, of the list is exactly what we all want to, make sure we're doing well. And Félix, you just wrap it up in a nice way that, supervising art directors are the hub, and we just want to make sure everything goes right in time with the money. Please, everybody, make sure the project is going forward and we're all pushing in the same direction, and we're just going to make it happen in a good way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With that wonderful little encapsulation, let's hit the Q&As, okay? I don't know if you've been looking at them, but
Thank you, Marianne.
you're wrong. Just to be fair, I'll start at the top and move through the bottom, and hopefully we can answer, and I think people should just jump in, whoever feels like answering. But we will try to move through them fairly quickly. So for an anonymous attendee, if I am both DGC and an IA member, and the art directing job is in BC, I assume this person, if I am both DGC and an IA member, and the art directing job is in BC, how difficult is it to travel there for that position? I don't know if that person was, anyways, you know what I mean? It's basically about traveling two different unions moving back and forth between different jurisdictions and different unions. That's essentially the part of the question.
Probably would.
You want to do it, Nathan? You want to answer that one?
Yeah, I couldn't help myself, but just to say that probably depends on how many people in BC are currently working. If they're going to be bringing someone in from out of town, by the sounds of it. Did I get that
I don't
right?
think it's so much a question of permits. I mean, obviously that comes, lots of other things come into play. But if they're actually already a member, like you're a good example, sort of, because you're at both IATSE and DGC in Alberta. It's just it's an oddity that exists in Alberta. But you've worked in Ontario, right?
I have, yeah.
As a DGC member. That
Yeah.
might partially.
I don't
answer.
think it's a problem because they have communication between IATSE and DGC. So I've been working, that you work in Vancouver or Ontario is the same. They have reciprocity, and they also have reciprocity for the union, like fringes and all of that.
And I've worked in Manitoba a lot, which is strictly
Yeah.
IATSE, but I'm DGC. So
It's not a problem.
if they want you, they can work it out.
Exactly.
I was going to
But
say, make yourself key, you'll get there.
Okay.
Also,
Another
They'll
question.
bring you.
James Peterson asks, how big a show would need a supervising art director? Is it 20 million, 40 million? Typically, what's the average of when the show is big enough to need a supervising art director? Go ahead.
I was gonna say it, I've been on shows that supervising art director at 30 million, and then you have a supervising that's in charge of the budget and everything and the scheduling. And sometimes you don't have two art directors, most of the time you try to have two art directors, but there have been shows that are a little bit smaller and you have a supervising and just maybe one art director and assistant art directors. So I don't think a 15 million that is supervising, that's for sure, but it starts around the 30-ish, I would say. Félix?
Yeah, I would say so. I think my 25, 30 million is kind of where you start having enough
Well-
construction or different locations. The other, yeah, and I wouldn't be I was going to say it depends a lot on the layout. If you're in two like different countries or something, for even if it's
It changes that thing, yeah.
changes a little bit, you
So-
might need someone on top of that department, and then production will kind of fight for it and say, oh, well, you're supervising, it's a small show, but then you're like, yeah, but there's people in.
But on the other
I'm
end,
with you too, like normally I don't think you'd start that before 25 millions.
but on the other end, I did $35 million show that I was on Pawn Sacrifice. For example, I was a designer and I had two art directors and assistant and no supervising. So I was doing a little bit of that step, trying to do the budgeting on
I
myself.
guess just to add to this question, if you get, who decides if there's a supervising art director? Is that something the production designer or production manager or line producer typically says, I think this is what's needed?
I think it comes from on my side, I think it comes from a, production designer that would need to have that position in charge.
Yeah, I think it's a conversation, but I think the structure is proposed by the production designer usually and sort of vented,
There's no hard rules, but I think who asked that question, sorry, James, you get the drift. It's sort of like there's this kind of range. And large is sort of the answer too. Anonymous attendee, my question is about overtime hours. I find that I'm often working 16+ hour days to stay ahead of the workload, especially in prep. Do any of you have advice on workload management or dealing with overtime discussions with producers who often don't want to budget on overtime hours? So I don't want to get into the gnarly parts of contracts here. So let's just try to keep this as a fairly simple answer of how to deal with that.
that's also the job of the supervising art directors to make sure they have enough people that they can go home at night.
100%. If you're working 16+ hours a day, you should stop.
Wrong job,
It's wrong.
wrong structure.
Not
Too much
effective.
work.
I like to go home. I'm a big fan of going home. I have a family. I mean, as soon as I can, I go home. So yeah, there's no reason to organize yourself to work 16 hours. There is no reason. You'll end up in trouble once in the show or a few times in the show, something happened. You really want to make it happen. You'll stay overnight. It's what it is. It's part of our job. But to be in prep, early in prep and constant 16 hours, someone is not doing what they're doing or leading you the wrong direction too, like taking too much time to do something. It's like prioritize, think outside the box, zoom out. no need to work 16 hours ever.
Like noon, as less 6 days as well as possible. You know, we're trying to keep it like human.
Again, it's a complex answer, and part of it's the experience of knowing how to have that, navigate that territory too, I think. So hopefully Anonymous can acquire the experience to know how to navigate that. Tiffany Pang, how can I start familiarizing myself with how much a given set costs to build and what is considered expensive or cheap for the production? Budgeting question.
I think it starts with Mondays, right? You have to look at how many Mondays and close your eyes and imagine how many carpenters you'll need to build a set for how many days, and then you'll multiply by the $600 a day or $7 or wherever you are in the world, because it could be very different. So, but I think the easiest is to go by Mondays, and then after the proportion are changing years to years regarding the material. So we had like a 60-40 material labor many years ago. Now it's more 50-50. And now I don't even know Félix, because I look at you. So yeah, so it starts with Mondays, and then the material sometimes is like a percentage of how many Mondays you'll put in there. And instinct, a lot of instinct. And the last show and the last show before and the show before this one, comparison of
Instinct is built with experience, right? And as Nathan was saying, like, get out of your office. Like, when you're a set designer, go see the set, go see how much people are building it, go see what detail you did to make them go crazy at it. And also ask the art. Like, I used to ask, I've worked a lot with Michel Laliberté. I used to, design sets, go see it and say, hey, how much that cost? And they're like, 2 million. And you're like, really? But as you do it, if you are aware of it, if you do your own little things with your pods and you're not talking to anyone, never get out of the office, it's hard to learn. If you're listening to what's going on and you hear the prices and you ask for them and stuff, when you are an art director, you'll have like maybe 30 sets in your mind that you exactly know how much they cost back then. You'll have already a better instinct about it, I think.
I was going to jump in here, and even if I'm not on part of the panel, it's like, yeah, keep your ears open. So it's a really smart way to learn, right? Keep your ears open in the room. But okay, how long do you have to prep before a show? It depends on the size of the show, but I'll let you guys have a range of experience. How long do you have to?
As long as it takes to do the job. I think your job as an art director or supervising art director is ask for the time it takes to do the thing. And, the people that are working 16 hours plus a day, they might be on a project where the person in charge wasn't asking for enough time or not asking for enough people to do the thing. So I think it depends on the requirements of the project and the script. And I don't know if anybody else has anything to add, but I think that's the ideal situation. Obviously, there's constraints and people will tell you, well, we don't have that much time, but there's no simple answer. They're all dependent on what the requirements are.
Yes, but I think that there's also a number in my mind that I put over the years that you can do everything. Is like with 8 weeks, you can build a set. So whichever, the size and scope, it could go to 17 and 15 and 12 and all that, and a bigger scope of shows, but 8 weeks is a good, chunk of time to build something. So of course, the preparation.
Okay. So there's no absolute.
No, there's no.
Sorry. Anonymous on what? Sorry, that question was from Deborah Dimitrov. I forgot to mention it. Next question, Anonymous. On one show, my art director worked from home, and it didn't really work. I'm not sure if it was just that specific situation, but do you think you could effectively be an art director from home?
Oh boy. I'm a person on foot on the ground, so I don't understand that one.
There's no
I
way.
do have to be in the office.
That's what your job is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I saw a lot of like, no way shaking heads here. So I think that's kind of clear. And also from what you guys have been saying all along here. So that question was further back. Nicholas LePage asks, art direction is not just management, it's also about directing artists. How do you handle the creative aspect of the job?
We're there with them. We're with the painters, with the construction, with the sculptors, and telling them the texture that we like. Build, like Nathan said, build boards of textures and references. So there's all that side of it that we're part of it, like 100%.
I think one really helpful piece of advice is, you're in a position as an art director to be asking for the work, but not doing any of the work. So when you're talking to the people that, 9 times out of 10, they know the ways of achieving textures and finishes better than you ever will. So you sort of have to, arrive at the solution together, tell them what the expectation is or the dream, and you kind of figure out a solution together to get there. And I think Félix mentioned, like, you don't come in there, demanding a certain way that you want something. You sort of try to, together as a team, arrive at the solution. So I think, you lean on the people that are doing the work a lot and ask them what they think.
Also, we were saying being, adaptability and easy to adapt. I feel as an art director in any position, supervising art director, key position or not, you're just in charge of sets or locations, you really have to suck in the project. Like, you've seen all the arts on the walls, you've seen the concepts, so you cannot put yourself in the middle of like, oh, I don't like those designs, I'm going to change it as I go. You can either try to make that better or at least blend into that. And so once you've sort of, absorbed all the visual from the production designer, where he's going. And when you are building your own set, to me, I've always, even set design, and I've always kind of been that, is like, I won't turn it in. And if I'm able to not show the production designer until I'm happy, I will, I'll make this set as beautiful as I think it should be, in the line of what he thinks, and I'll push it and then show it to the others as not finished and then it's not what he wanted, but I take it personal for it to be beautiful before it goes to the next step, is what I mean. I sit with the painters and stuff and I say, I think that's right, but I feel, what if we tried it with a glaze and try it and make a sample? Oh, that's nice, let's add that to that, and then we'll show it. Well, let's just show the sample to the production designer. It's not exactly what he asked, but I feel this has taken it to the next level towards where he wants to go, so let's try that. I think you have to really be able to put yourself in this artist position of feeling the project, understanding where you're going, and be able to reflect that, not just going down and say, hey, we have 8 hours, we have 1 week to build this, there's only $20 left, let's get done. You have the one side that you keep that, but you're managing, the time and resources to make sure you can push the design and the visual as you're going, right?
And just to add to what Félix is saying, as an art director, you are probably one of the only people, well, one of the many, but very closely with the production designer. So what they're required, what they want visually, and what they want in terms of builds and whatnot. So you have an idea of the scope in the drive or direction that the production designer wants. Because I've been a set designer for many years before I became an art director. So exactly what Félix said, I would design with the production designer to get it to a certain point. And then it's the art director's job to facilitate that. But at the same time, as art director, your job is to make that vision happen in the best of your capabilities on time. So having that aspect of how you think, what they like. So if you're in a position where, like, I've been on a show where my production design is in a different country, and it's just like, okay, well, I have an idea of what my production designer likes. I'm going to design it in that way and then show him and see if this is the same, if we're in the same ballpark, what they want and what they require. And then it just helps the design forward.
I think it's very important what you just said, Barbara. And like me being a production designer, I need to communicate to my art directors as much as possible my vision.
Yeah.
Any kind of images, imagery, illustration, concept art, so they can be my eyes when I'm not there. Make sure that this vision is going to be pushed through all the way, and they can make decision, and they can say more of this and less of that, and then keep going with the artists and get back with, hey, I did this. What do you think? You know, I think it looks better. I know it's not what we talked about, but I think it looks what you thought would be. It's more where you want to go. I think the communication is the key. Like Nathan said, communication is like the key of everything.
Especially in this
Did someone else have something they wanted to add to that before I move on to the next question? Because if someone asked that exact question, that communication between art director and production designer, but it got answered through the course of the last few minutes. Lawrence Van Beek asked a question about what skills you need, but that was answered during the course of your conversation. But he asked a second question, using the amusement park info booth metaphor, should an art department coordinator possess the same degree of knowledge as the art director? I don't quite know what the amusement park.
I would know.
Anyway, should an art department coordinator possess the same degree of knowledge as the art director? Are design skills the key difference between those two roles? I think that's kind of been answered through the course of this, but go for it, you guys.
I would.
everyone to do their job. So the coordinator coordinates, and I mean, they have to know a lot of things, but I like people to do their things myself, you know. So yes, the coordinator should have a lot of information so that they know, but I like, you know, that each stay on their things. If I don't like that everyone knows everything and shares everything and then gets involved in everything, then it becomes a mess, I find. That's all I mean. So I like to subdivide a little bit. Everyone knows about everything in the project and all that, but I don't let people get involved in everything.
Right.
There's a big difference in Quebec from the coordinator, art department coordinator, than it is in the rest of Canada, is that the coordinator is also doing the budget for construction with the art director and the supervising art director. So they're in charge of the budget, where construction coordinator normally in the other provinces is taken care of. Here is the art department coordinator that supervise the budget with with the art director or the supervising, putting it together. So it's a bit of a difference.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. Joel Tobman, because we have people from different jurisdictions, which is true, I'm curious about how certain things are handled elsewhere that weren't specifically covered in your discussion. And again, we need to keep this brief, but regarding playbacks and clearances, how do you deal with these in different jurisdictions? Joel is in Alberta. In my opinion, aren't necessarily the responsibility of the art department, but these have significant overlap with the art department. And as art directors, I think we need to keep tabs on these things for sure. Might be different based on the scale of the project, but I'm curious. So just maybe talk about that a little bit. Playback and clearances.
Most art departments we have now have, as part of the art department, a clearance person, especially during television shows where seem to be many more restrictions. And the art director used to seem to handle that, but now they're allowing to have a clearance person as part of our team.
Same here.
Same. Yeah, clearance is totally separate, and then we hire a company, and we hire a clearance person in the office that's going to connect with clearance department and legal department from, different production, and different studios. And same for playback. I would say that we have a list of playback, and there's a playback person hired by production. It's from the production department and not from the art department production. And
that's in Quebec?
Yes.
Hey, Barbara, want to talk about that in Ontario?
Ontario is different in terms of playback. Playback is actually the art department. So sometimes on shows that have, when I worked on Expanse, we actually had a room where playback. So you had multiple people in the room dealing with playback and constantly dealing with our production designer. and any of the other departments to have conversations. We have playback meetings. Same in terms of clearances, it's the same with everybody else, where clearance is somebody else who deals with legal and whatnot, but we're constantly in conversation. Like depending on the show, I worked on The Boys, and clearance was such a pivotal part of it that we actually had to bring the clearance person into the office just because we were dealing with so much crap.
No,
So-
you're, I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. I said playback is a different, but playback
Yeah.
person that plugs all the things, but they do their own playback list, and then we, there's a proposal with the designer and say, what are we gonna see on the screen? But at some point, if there's gonna be gazillion screens, we agree on the look, and then you don't want to go into the minutia of what it's gonna be on the left hand side of the screen, right?
But the
Unless
art
it's very
department,
specific to scripts.
the art department produces the content, then it goes to the on-set.
Yeah.
And I've had on some show where the director was really peculiar about playbacks, and also there was loads of them. We've had in the art department a playback coordinator, which is a little on top, but so one person that deals with set dressing and with art directors and all that, and communicates with the playback people and make sure everything is, this has been shown, this has been approved, the director has seen this, we have used this in whatsoever scene, we can use it again, it's never been seen, sort of all these things. And that proved to be very good to have on a larger scale sort of playback show, because everyone goes, it's something that ends up being, not in the art department that always comes back, but also it just bites you when it's not well done. So it was asked of me to do it that way, that on that show, and I thought it was great to have that position, really, because it was just too much.
But then it goes straight to the production designer. Like I remember Arrival, we had all those screens and drawings and the language and this and that, and so many screens between the different countries. And the playback person was putting it all together, but the funnel was like going straight to the production designer and the director, make sure that they like it. So you don't want to go into having a set decorator, saying something about what it looks like, or another.
Okay, we got lots of questions still. Okay, so moving on. James Peterson asks, has anyone here worked on virtual productions that use the large LED screens instead of green screen? Can you talk to the difference in how the art department organizes themselves on a project like this? Big topic, so again, try to just kind of keep it as a nutshell and a response if you can. Anyone?
I've used them little panels, but I've never used them as a.
You never the volume wall, is that, I think that's what's meant by.
Yeah.
Nobody's worked on the volume wall
Once
here?
maybe, but
I've
I find it
never,
weird to-
okay, so I've done it, but as a set designer, but not as art directing. And the way they set it up was, you had we call it AR walls, and there's a couple of them in Toronto, and it's more or less, I think we have a company called Pixelmondo that deals with it, so it's more or less visual effects. Gives the imagery to them, and we build what we need onto the stage. And then there's allowances for how much you can build in the space, but it's still under the part of the art department regardless.
Just on that note, if you go to the DGC YouTube channel, there's a I forget if it's a masterclass. They're talking exactly about that, so you might want to check that out, James. It's on the it's called virtual production, and it's about projects that have been done, sample production projects that were done on the volume screen. So go to the DGC YouTube website, which was listed in the chat earlier in the day. Maybe Julian will put it up again, because you can actually see some of that. It's really good information.
I'm curious to see how that's going to evolve in the future.
Yeah.
I don't quite believe in that technology very much myself. I find it more limiting than anything, but it's
pretty interesting. It's pretty. I was at a workshop here last year the Directors Guild held, and it was pretty interesting what they.
Yeah, there's going to be another one. Yeah, they say it's coming in Montreal. We'll have a workshop
Yeah, Montreal held.
coming here. So we'll talk more about this.
That's another whole masterclass. Dara Wishengrad. Hello, bonsoir tous. Would love to hear your thoughts and techniques for responses to producers who hand you a not a penny over budget prior to hire.
But
Sorry,
You
I
can't go over
missed-
the budget. You have to sign on the dotted line that you're not going to go over the budget before you even get hired. That's what that question's about.
you should
Would
find
any of you sign that?
Yeah.
They all expect that.
So
As
what do you
much as
say?
we
We'll
can,
do our
right?
best.
They all expect it, but they also want to make a movie.
Yeah, it's like as much as we can, and then we do a little log that we call every week of what were the new requests and what was approved. So it's an approval of ridges, so you can spend more money than originally you were told. So we try to go like a week by week and make sure that all the new needs are being listened at, and everybody waits in and they say, okay, yes, we really want to have that pool with the underwater thing, and then we're going to put the money for it because it was not originally in the script. So I think it needs to be very followed very, very tightly. And as soon as you have a new request, you try to talk to it to everybody, producers, director, and make sure, like, what do we want to do, guys? You want to pitch in more money? We'll do it.
It's also about being structured. I think when producers, have worked with you a little bit, they understand that you're either asking crazy things all the time and just asking more and more to make sure you're covered and stuff. But also if you're coming structured, and like when we were talking about that big schedule thing, and you say, here I have one art director here, this one is on the plane to there, and how do you want me to have an art director here and take care of those sets? It's just logic, and then when you ask money, I think when you come in structured, then they can say, well, okay, great, I don't want that part of it because I don't have that money. If you cannot justify where your spending is coming from, it's hard for them to balance, so they'll just turn you down, but very often. But if you come in prepared with a structure, then you'll say it becomes obvious, and then I like to make them choose and say, you don't have to spend that money, but if you want this, you'll have to spend that. But if you want another version, we can talk about a different version where you don't have to spend that much money. But I think it's the idea of itemizing and sort of venting your budgets and every aspects of it is very interesting.
I think you have to bring them in the conversation, so the decision at the very end is not yours, or you're not pointed at, and it's like a common decision of where the money's going. But you don't sign a blank check when you start saying, I'm never ever going to go over budget that you gave me at the very first day. That's not how I go, sorry.
So we're not essentially 9 o'clock. There's still about 10 questions. Do we want to wrap it up, or are you guys ready to hang in there for another 15 minutes? And
what if we typed out maybe responses to the questions at a later
can you
date?
do that?
I'd volunteer for some of them, but
It's just, okay, I don't know what to do, because it's so good, because obviously there's some really great information being shared here. We'll just go quickly, okay? We'll just have a really quick, try to go through them quickly. What software do you typically use for visualizing mood boards and designs? Throw out some answers, just
Miro.
What?
M-I-R-O.
M-I-R-O, Miro?
I believe it's called. That's one, but I think honestly just printing them off and putting them on the
board,
visual
the wall.
board is the best, I think.
Yeah, a hard copy image board. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's my preferred method for sure.
But if you're doing a mood board, for example, like Félix, you did the huge dune, what do you guys use? Ewen, what do you use on Moonshot? Smaller show?
Mostly, as I said, the same as hard copy. Yeah.
Same thing here.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna almost skip over this next question. What are your opinions on the use of AI in the art department? You know what? Go to the DGC YouTube channel. We had a masterclass, not a masterclass. We had a panel discussion on it about 2 months ago on that exact subject, and we avoided it on purpose for this panel because we just knew it was a very huge topic, which the DGC is addressing. And so is that fair enough to, if we can just kind of move on to the next question, because it's a really big conversation.
No right answer here.
What's that?
No right answer here.
Well, there's nobody has a right answer. So I think, but do watch the DGC All Art AI conversation. It was quite good, and it's definitely on the radar. But we least don't have time to go into it right now. I'm really sorry about that. I know it's a burning issue with a lot of people. Question for Felix: how much are you requiring sets to be drawn in 3D now, and how much is still in 2D? What programs are you and your set designers using? Rhino, Vectorworks, other? Are you using interactive previs tools like UE, Twinmotion? Just a quick kind of encompassing response to that, if you could, Felix.
I mean, I always adapt to the show. There's things, I mean, when I was in Rome, everyone worked by hand, but it was fine for most of it. You know, we did 2Ds, beautiful drawings for, you know, all the, it depends a lot on what you have to do. By hand doesn't exist much anymore, but still I would use it if it was around once in a while. I mean, when I think now pretty much everything gets designed in 3D just because it's so easy, you know, with SketchUp and these things to like have, but I don't always ask for it. Some things can be drawn in 2D still, very simple things that everyone will understand, but it became so easy to do 3D. I think it became a standard, you know, but so the program and the programs and the detail amount and all that really depends on the type of set and the type of construction it will need. And also the program is kind of the same thing. If you're gonna need to run CNC, if you're gonna need to like send this to visual effects, like all these will influence what programs, but
if it's organic or if it's not that organic, if it's more architectural drawing.
Yeah, very. So
if we're gonna go to organic, we're gonna go towards Rhino, right? And if
ZBrush nowadays is used a little bit for.
Are you designing mountains or caves, or is it more like a Roman columns and architecture, 3D drawings?
Rhino, and I mean, you know, Supper was used quite a bit.
3D Max.
3D Max.
Lots of things. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Where is it? Sorry. How competitive? This isn't. I think this isn't quite the right question for about training assistant art director apprenticeship. That's not. I won't focus on that right now. Okay. Do any of you have kids? How have you been able to navigate balancing family and advancing in your career? Big question, but I think maybe going back to what Nathan presented, but it's a quick response because all of you are different situations.
I have an 8-year-old son and a baby on the way, actually. I think it's definitely more difficult when you have a family. I think as you start to progress in your career, you'll get offers to go out of town. And I think that's probably the biggest strain on a family relationship. And that can sort of, you know, keep you closer to home. So I think that definitely affects your career. But I think having pretty clear rules on when you're going to stop communicating, I think you have to kind of make a personal commitment to stop communicating at a certain time and, you know, put your phone away at a certain time. It can be hard to do, but I think you do have to develop a strategy for shutting it down at a certain time. Because it's not, for me personally, it's not worth, you know, it's still a job at the end of the day. There's more to life than art directing.
There's kids.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's not an easy thing. It's not a job that ages really well, does it? With kids and family and things. I mean, it's all exciting, and same as you. Is like I had my first kid and I was, you know, called to go to Rome. And like, I mean, you know, then I could bring the family, but it's never an easy, you know, an
No.
easy thing when you get a nice offer. But I think maybe there's one thing, I agree a lot with, like, shutting it down at one point in the day and just say that's enough for today and stuff. And I think you need to organize yourself a little bit and not be shy about that. There's a big culture in the movies of like just working in the office and being there for some reason. And some people, I realize at night, they're not efficient. They're just there. It's like, I like to go home. I start early. I get very efficient, but I try to touch base at home before the kids are in bed as much as I can. And also, I think as we come up the art department, as we have, I think we all feel very grateful for the jobs we have, and we're all freelancers and things, but you're kind of tempted to always say yes to everything. You feel like you need to do things and keep it rolling. And it's maybe true a little bit, but when you have kids and all that, I think you need to sometimes just say no and not be afraid of that, and just say, I'll take the next one. I'll be home for this one because I just work. It's impossible for me to do this family wise, and just go with it. I've never said no, so I don't know what I'm saying, but I mean, all I mean is like,
it doesn't all have to do with going away also. I think it's easy when you say you're going to be asked to go work somewhere else, where you can say, I'll wait a little bit because the kids, like I have a kid too, are not old enough. But there's also how you manage in your own town, working those hours and those crazy days. So as you just said, you have to make a little cutoff at some point and say, you know what, it's going to be an hour when I get back home. We can chat about it, and then we don't talk about it anymore. And next day.
yeah, and I mean, the jobs that you're comfortable with, and in your situation, you're by yourself, and you have all those opportunities. Just go ahead with them. At some point,
I think you also have to have a great husband or wife or boyfriend or whatever you want to call it to support you, because if it wasn't from my Robert, I wouldn't be there. I must say that he took over for my son at the very beginning, like big time.
Yeah.
And I was crazy at work.
Yeah, I think that's definitely super important.
Mm.
It's a hard thing to explain to your spouse why so often. And I mean, I think it's probably often why lots of relationships in film don't work out, is because it is very hard to describe to someone on the outside what we do and the level of expectation and the competition and all those things. But yeah.
Then you have breaks, you have longer breaks in between the jobs, which are great. I think it's one of our really super fantastic thing is that we can have like 2 months, 3 months between shows, and then you can be 200% there for that time. Same with our friends, for that matter.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move on to the next one. If I don't have a background in architecture, Maggie Heathcote asks this question. If I don't have a background in architecture or set design, what can I do to supplement these skills? Is it worth taking courses in drafting or learning specific CAD programs? Thanks for all the insight.
Hi.
Definitely.
I think you can take any drawings, and it could be hand drawings, but it could be CAD. It could also be SketchUp, which is a very easy program that you can put, a little bit of visual 3D together. I don't think everybody necessarily needs to be drawing on CAD or a 3D program to be an art director. That's where I come from. It's a big skill. It's a big plus. But eventually, set designer versus art directors is 2 different jobs in my mind, and you don't necessarily have to have.
Mm-hmm. Libby Wampler asks, what are your favorite conflict resolution tactics? List 1 or 2, just so we can keep moving.
Is it between us and our husband, or is it between ourselves?
I think it meant in work, the job.
I think
I'm sure it meant at the job.
Kidding.
be careful.
Kidding card, sorry.
Be careful with conflicts you're trying to resolve in a production. It's definitely not your job to resolve all of them, but when they happen like within your domain about work, and obviously assuming there's no HR issues or anything like that, like, I think Felix touched on this a bit, like the movie has certain requirements and we all have to sort of facilitate them. So when, problems come up, try to come at it with like, how can I help? Like, what are some of the things? Explain to me what the problem is, obviously. And, here are some of the ways that I can help, rather than, it sort of diffuses the problem pretty quickly when you look at, well, what is the actual issue? What resources do we have available to give you ultimately? I don't think you can do much more than that though, really.
And sometimes it's about, making, as you're saying, sort of making that conversation happen and see what the source of the problem is. And as an art director, maybe sometimes what you can do is change the structure accordingly, Sometimes, I don't know, the painter and the sculptor are always butting head because there should be a base coat, there shouldn't be a base coat, there should, whatever, And then once you sit down in an office and say, what's your problem? Oh, he never puts a base coat. There should be a base coat on this. Oh, right. And then you're like, well, here's how we're going to do it. Like you take the decision or you make up a system to avoid that problem. Like, okay, now I understand what the problem is. You're going to have to do a base coat on every of your pieces. So when it gets to the paint shop, it can be painted right away. And this discussion is over. You'll never have to discuss that again. So I don't think, as Nathan says, like if you get involved in every thing, it's not your job and it's a lot of energy and it just comes around you. But the way you can help, because you are the one establishing the structure, is by adapting your structure to some problems. Then the very personal things is personal. It's not really you. But I mean, if you can do something with your work, with the way you work, the way people work together, sometimes it's helpful.
If you're a Directors Guild member, this is also, they offer quite a few courses in exactly that, to how to deal with conflict resolution, harassment, all the kind of issues that in fact they're not on the periphery of our job, but they're very much part of our industry. So it just helps give you tools to navigate things like this and to help deal with conflict resolution. So if you're a guild member who asked that question, check out the courses that are available to you, because courses are available to help deal with that kind of issue. Can one move from coordinator to art director without being a set designer? Yeah. Depends on if you can.
I don't see why not.
Skills to be a set designer. You have to get the skills to be a set designer, right?
But there's also, I mean, there's all types of art directors. There's art directors that are less involved creatively. There's people that are, more construction oriented. There's people that do a lot of locations. I mean, you will find your own limits, basically, right? So you can actually learn the job and you may be very good at it, even if you've not been an art director, a set designer. The set design helps you in understanding things if you've understood it already, or if you're going to work on shows that without construction.
I think, I think coordinators could go from, you wouldn't go straight to art director, but you would probably start as an assistant art director and then learn that little process and then move on to the next step, right?
Do any of you have thoughts on virtual art departments? We kind of touched on this already, like those from post-production, but virtual art departments were integrating through virtual production. How do the logistics overlap between the art department and the virtual art department, especially with the advent of Unreal Engine? It's kind of a mixed question, but I think you guys could probably give an answer to that. The integration of two departments like that. No?
Well, I mean, usually the production designer, I mean, I don't know if that answers the questions, but the production designer should be the one leading and have a word to say on the visuals anyway. So, ideally, production designers like to drive that, and so, I mean, I've had that before where there are like a person from visual effects working in the art department and creating stuff and taking models and, working with it with the production designer and sending it to their side of the job. You know, I think the illustrations to start with that are driven by the production designer, the work that's done in the art department, and if you have someone from visual effects working in the art departments, you know, sort of taking that all in and transferring it. I mean, obviously there's some creative work to be done after and all this, but that's how I see it works well. It makes everyone happy, especially the production designers, and you know, they've seen everything before it comes out. That's kind of how I feel it.
And then I'm going to try to close out here. What are some, as a final party note of hopefully encouragement and stuff to people ask questions? We're still here. We still got 75 people here. What are some key aspects you look for when hiring? Let me do a little round table thing with that.
Yeah.
May we ask what position? Is it for hiring art director?
I think it was just a general question from Anonymous. What are some key aspects you look for when hiring?
Well, I mean,
if you're an art director and you're trying to hire your team, I guess that's.
Depends on the positions that you require.
Yeah, it's different.
the only thing is, to me, I mean, as a general, is first I'll evaluate obviously the experience, you know, background, references, but also when I build teams, I think a lot of the whole, the team as a whole, and the sort of synergy that's gonna be created, because we're gonna get a lot of work asked and stuff. So sometimes I will prefer someone with a little less experience that seems more flexible or a little easier to connect with the rest of the team, rather than the person that has the most experience but I don't see quite well in that specific project. So I think it's a lot of what we all do. It's human relationships, the sort of cleverness, like you're there, you're aware, you're willing to do it. You know, I feel that from you, and your questions are clever, kind of thing, and you're on it. And I think the person that wants to, not necessarily wants to go up, but as like, you know, is animated to be in the art and learn and all this and bring a lot of energy to the project, is sometimes I would prioritize on the person that has done it for 35 years and just wants to go home and doesn't really want to deal with the rest of the crew, and you know. So I mean, obviously the rest depends a lot on the job and all this, but to me, the energy of the whole group and the energy that you yourself will bring to the project will play a lot on top of the experience, I think.
Nicely said.
Well, we're at 9:18. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I know, again, it got rushed in some cases, but hopefully for those that are attending, especially those that aspire to be art directors, you guys have given them lots of food for thought and encouragement and inspirational ideas. And I want to thank you all for being part of this panel tonight, and for Isabelle for you moderating it. And I also want to encourage everyone to, again, check out the link for the DGC YouTube in the chat, because in about a week's time or later this week, this recording of this tonight's session will be there, so you can review it, or we'll be also be sharing that link on the various DGC websites, etc., and Facebook sites, etc. But again, thank you to all of you for your generous time in tonight's conversation, preparing for it, and actually speaking with everyone. We appreciate it.
And thank you all. Thank you all. It was a great first one. And, you know, I think we did
a lot of thanks there as well. So if you look in the chat, there's a lot of people thanking you too. So again, fantastic conversation. We went on for like almost 3 hours. We started at 6:30. It's almost 9:30. So that's our longest one so far, I think. But it's fantastic. And I also thank Julian Lung and Hans Engel and the DGC National Office for helping facilitate these all art conversations, which are fantastic. And it's because of everyone out there who's attended that they're also a huge success. So we'll be having another one in October. It's a creative conversation between a director and a production designer. So there'll be more information coming about that. So stay tuned and
Right.
be well and hang in there. Yeah, it's peaks and valleys. That's what this business is all about. So we're in a bit of a valley right now, a lot of us with the strong stuff. Hang in there, be tenacious. That's something we all need to be when we're in this business too, tenacious and resilient. So again, thanks for everyone's time and enjoy the rest of the summer. Still
Thank
here.
you. Thank you both for
Thank you,
having
all
us.
of you.
Thanks
Until the
to
next-
everyone listening. That was very nice. A lot of people out there. Very beautiful.
Thank you for all the questions and being there. Yeah, I see there was a lot of people tonight. That's great. Thank you.